Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 156 of Through the Years, the podcast reviews Ring of Honor, show by show, from the beginning. My name is Trevor Dame. I'm joined, as always, by the co-host, Matt Feuerstein. And to start 2026 off right, we would do something else, but instead, we brought him back, folks. Our first guest in a long time. Matt informed us before the show he has not been on in 2 years, 2 wonderful years. You might know him as the host of the 5-Star Match Game, the only ongoing, at the very least, pro wrestling game show podcast I am aware of. At least I'm giving myself that cover. You might know him from Joe versus the World. You might know him from guest appearing on every single pro wrestling podcast ever. Eventually, he is known as the Gag Man of Wrestling, Joe Gagne. Joe, how are you?
I'm doing great. It's so good. It's so good to be back to talk to my friends. I'm so excited.
Trevor, that was mean. That was a mean intro, even for you, I have to say.
What? He's the Gag Man of Wrestling. No, Joe is I was telling Joe just before the show, Joe keeps saying, this is going to be my last show, because he assumes, because that most of our guests only come on when they've been at a show, but that's not always been the case. He can come back whenever he wants. I want that on the record, open door policy, whenever he wants. He ever wants to call us up and do a show, any show, he can do it. So folks, if you want more Joe Gagne, that's on him. Don't get mad at us. If this does turn out to be the last episode he's on, that's Joe's choice.
In other news, this is our first show of 2026. Already a one for the books, I would say, this year.
What a wonderful year. Let's just talk about current events for a while. I'm sure our listeners will enjoy that, and that won't be controversial. Actually, we can get right to the episode this time, and that would be the show that Joe Gagne attended. And Joe, I will have the classic Joe Gagne on the show, Trevor Dame Unfair Question later, where I ask you about a show that happened a million years ago, something that you can't possibly remember. So be on the lookout for that. We do get one of those a show. But the show that we're reviewing today, Death Before Dishonor V, Night 1. It took place August 10th, 2007 at the Roxbury Community College in Boston, Massachusetts, for a reported crowd of 550 fans. Dave Meltzer would write in The Observer, all the guys who appeared on the ROH pay-per-view show, because remember, this would be right after the a few weeks after the first ROH pay-per-view ever premiered on all cable systems. Dave wrote, all the guys who appeared on the ROH pay-per-view show appear to be more over than 2 months ago in the same city. Whether that's coincidence or cause and effect is unclear, other than there was a difference. Now, Matt, I'm not going to ask this to Joe just because I don't know if Joe's been following along to every show, watching every show, like a good listener should. But Matt, I did think this was a very good crowd in terms of reaction. Joe did his part, but I don't know if I noticed I don't know if that would have popped into my head as someone that's watching every show. Like, man, this is night and day. This must be a pay-per-view thing.
Yeah, I would never. That never would occur to me in my entire life that it had anything to do with the pay-per-view or anything like that. It just felt like an ROH crowd to me. It also is, one bonus is this is the rare. Correct me if I'm wrong, Joe. The rare Boston show that takes place at the same venue as the one before it.
That is a rarity I don't quite remember, but we are actually in Boston for these events and not just on some surrounding town. So that is a big step forward, although it does make getting to shows, especially because largely Boston's been the Friday part of a double header. So getting into Boston on a Friday is a daunting task. So that added extra challenges to getting to this show.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing I wish we had kept track on through the years if I had known how bad it was going to be at the start, which was just the number of different venues that they've had to book in the Boston area. Just, it seems like they've been cursed on a few other places, but particularly Boston, it feels like, yeah, like Matt's, it's notable that it's 2 in a row. That's how crazy it's been at times. But we opened this show with the Briscoes.
Wait. I'm sorry.
No, go on.
So I should have done research on this because I remember very distinctly being on Joe versus the World at the time, Joe, the final Joe versus the World, where we talked about the Death Before Dishonor 2007 weekend. And I guess, was it this show or was it the show in June where there was a shooting outside of the event?
That was when I was going to ask Joe later, but I guess we should talk about that now. So I'll just reference this because, Matt, I'll note this was referenced in the newsletters.
Yeah.
This is during the first match we'll cover, Jack Evans versus defeated David Richards. There's a note from, I believe, let me just scroll in my notes to find it. Figure 4 Weekly from Brian Alvarez. And Brian wrote at the time, we got a report that there was a shooting outside the building during this match, but apparently it wasn't a big deal in that shootings happen outside buildings all the time in Roxbury. Joe, do you remember this, to Matt's question? And is this true?
I just remember hearing about it afterwards. I don't remember there. Not like we heard like gunfire or anything, and then I think it was just found out later like something had occurred. It was nothing that disturbed the show or anything like that. But I know. Yeah. I thought he was going to say shootings happen outside buildings just in general, and I suppose that's true. But,
in America, you know, it's just an American thing. So what I remember about, you know, when I was on Joe vs. the World is I thought I noted the irony at the time, or at least the humorousness, maybe not irony, but that at the time there were people talking about this venue when they moved there, talking about how this was a dangerous neighborhood, and other people were like, stop being such wimps and just, you know, be grown-ups and go to the venue. And then it's just they actually had a shooting outside the venue. Like it's just funny that, like, I mean, still you know, I don't still don't be afraid to go to a neighborhood, but you know, it's just funny how that worked out.
It's also weird because I think we'll get to this later. I think this was one of the early Project 161 promotion shows where they actually had people like outside. I don't know if you remember this, Joe, people outside the building handing out like Project 161 leaflets or something. So there's just some weird fantasy in my, well, not a fantasy, I'm not looking forward to this, but the idea of what if those worlds like connected? Like, so you're just handing out your worked shoot flyers as one does, and then there's like a shooting right outside the building near you. Like, it's just what a weird moment in independent wrestling history.
Yeah, maybe someone just really doesn't like work shoots. There was a shooting outside of my high school talent show when I was a freshman. So, you know, I guess shootings do just happen outside of buildings.
I mean, you guys are American, so I just assume it's constantly happening.
Yeah, it's fair. For the record, I have never touched a gun. I don't know if that makes me probably a very strange American. Many other things, but yeah.
I have not touched a gun, but I have fired a super soaker into someone's face, even though that says distinctly in the instructions you should not do that. So I feel like I'm basically American in that sense. Anyway, we open with the Briscoes backstage, and since the show happened in Roxbury Community College, backstage in this case means what looks to be a goddamn classroom, and one in particular that seems to be teaching some kind of course on biology, the human body, healthcare, something like that. And so the Briscoes hype tonight's Boston street fight with Steen and Generico, and then Jay, because he's in this room and has access to props, he grabs one. He grabs 2 nearby crutches, and he walks on them and says, that's how Steen and Generico are going to be after tonight. And then Jay walks by a model skeleton and he points to that and he goes, that's how Steen and Generico will be after tonight. And he starts cracking himself up, which I thought was adorable. And I just wrote my notes, this was a better intro than the typical Rebecca Bayless one we've seen lately. It was barely anything, but it was basically the Briscoes being Carrot Top for a minute, and yeah, I enjoyed it.
This 30-second promo might have been my favorite thing on the entire show, honestly. Like, and that's not a knock on the show. Like, it's just, first of all, Mark Briscoe was wearing a plain white Hard Rock Cafe t-shirt. Jay was wearing a black, it said, like, I couldn't see the whole thing, but it's like black 2004 World Championship pumpkin, like PUNKIN, PUMPKIN, or something like that. And I couldn't tell what it said, but I don't know which shirt I like better, but they both made me extremely happy. Then they were playing with crutches. They were playing with skeletons. And then we get it ends with like just a zoom into the skeleton. And it's just like, what, like, how could this have been better? It couldn't have been better.
Joe Gagne. Go on.
The crutches, I understand. Like, yeah, okay, they'll need crutches, but to reduce them to a skeleton, I don't know what that would entail in the context of a Boston street fight. Like, good Lord.
And a Hard Rock Cafe t-shirt.
Well, yes.
Have you? Okay.
Fun fact. Okay.
Okay.
Not to try to one up MJF or anything with his wrestling themed bar mitzvah, but it was I don't know if it's still a thing, but it was certainly a thing in the '90s, where like if your bar mitzvah party, you would have like a theme. And some of my friends had like a baseball theme, and the different like tables were named after different baseball teams or whatever. And my bar mitzvah was in 1996, and I wanted it to be like alternative rock, like as the theme, and like the different tables were named after different bands and stuff. And so we had T-shirts made that said on it Matt's Hard Rock Cafe, and I don't know where mine is, but I know for sure my aunt still has hers. So, if I ever have to cut a promo on a wrestling show, I'm going to have to wear that shirt just to one up Mark Briscoe here.
I want to see that shirt. I feel like that's our equivalent of the Red Letter Media Dick the Birthday Boy T-shirt. We need the Matt's Hard Rock Cafe T-shirt image from his childhood. But okay, quick question before we moved on. We're learning so much about each other, so why don't we continue? We learned about guns. Have either of you ever used crutches? Because I am strangely proud to say I have not yet needed ever to use crutches.
I have not.
Nope, never.
See, I mean, odds are eventually we're all probably going to have to use them.
I'm knocking on wood right now for all of us.
Yeah, that's good. So let's get into the two dark matches. And Joe, you may have thoughts about them, but since this show is like 800 years old, and this show is 18 and a half years old. So that means there are literally people that are like moving out of their parents' houses that weren't alive when this show happened. So Joe, I'm not, if you have any live thoughts, obviously we would love to have them, but I'm going to give you the pass right now and go, I do not expect you to remember anything, but there were two dark matches. The first was a dark six-man mayhem match. Shane Hagedorn defeated Alex Payne, Bobby Dempsey, Ernie Osiris, Mitch Franklin, and Rhett Titus. And then we had Sarah Del Rey defeating Candice LeRae, which this might have been her first ever appearance on Ring of Honor show. I'm not sure. Joe, I can't imagine you had thoughts about these.
You imagine correct. I have. This could be made up. Someone could have hacked this wiki and put them on there, and I'd be like, "Yep, sure, you got it." Yeah, I have. I'm sorry. My apologies to the people involved, but I got nothing.
But where you may have had thoughts is, as Matt mentioned, you guys covered this show on a Joe versus the World, and I did not listen to it because I kind of didn't want to get your opinions in my head. I would like the fresh opinions. So, but maybe for all we know, I don't know if you guys re-listened, maybe you talked about this stuff there. I know Matt remembers the shooting. Maybe you guys saw the shooter at the time and just forgot it. Maybe one of you was the shooter. Who knows?
I was not at the show. I have never even been to Boston. So.
Okay. You know what, Matt? Just keep saying that. Okay. So that brings us to the opening match. Jack Evans defeated Davey Richards by disqualification in 11 minutes, 18 seconds when Roderick Strong shoved Jack off the top turnbuckle as he was going for the big 630 splash finisher. Matt, what'd you think about it? First match we're reviewing of the 2026.
So it was a rematch from the opener of the Glory by Honor 4 Night 2. And 5 Night 2, excuse me. Glory by Honor 5 Night 2 from the year before. And that was fun, but I remember it being just like short, so didn't really stick out. But I thought this was, until the finish, better than that. It was just more substantial, and there were some good near falls. I didn't like the finish, but I did like that this was the second show in a row that Jack's opponent jumped him mid breakdance, because Albright did that at Race to the Top tournament also. They pretty early on are escaping each other's big moves. There's a spot where Richards catches Jack in a springboard clothesline and locks in a stretch muffler, which I think is how he won the first match, but obviously that's not what the end of that match was. There was a cool comeback that Evans does where he flips over Richards' back to get out of the corner and then immediately hits a flipping back kick. Richards gets on the apron when Evans goes for the space flying tiger drop and cuts him off with a kick to the head. There's a spot where Jack hits a flying knee and a 2 count, and he seems like very, very tired after just 7 or 8 minutes. he hits a handspring and in the corner, flies all the way out to the floor, and then he hits his biggest. I think the biggest move that he hits is a springboard or a springboard twisting press off the top rope all the way to the floor. And then they just reverse. They just hit their big moves, reversals, 2 counts. Richards gets into a shoving match with the ref. Evans avoids a tombstone, hits a reverse Rana, which is pretty cool. Gets a 2 count, and that's when Evans hits a Tree of Woe, double knees, and he goes up again, selling his back, and that's when Strong comes out and shoves him to the floor. I really, I mean, whatever, it's an opener. I never like those kinds of finishes in ROH. There was also a spot where early in the match where Richards hit a big clothesline on Evans and yelled "die," and then the W word, if you know what I'm talking about. That's not a good word to say because it's a play on a racial slur. I won't expand on it, but not an okay word to say, but I guess something that people would have said more openly in 2007, maybe, although I feel like racist words are even more popular now than they were back then in some ways. Yeah, I don't know. Richards was just doing his usual shtick that he's doing lately. Evans was energetic, but definitely you could tell that he's still gets gassed during these singles matches. I think you posited recently, Trevor, like there was smoking might play a role. I don't want to assume anything, but I thought this was a good match. I did like it better than the Glory by Honor 5 opener. I think they could do even better, and the finish was... I understood why they did it, but still was not into it.
It is funny that there was like this classic indie tag team, Jack Evans and Roderick Strong, between one of the guys that probably had the best cardio on the indies and a guy who at times was clearly struggling, in singles matches. Joe, what do you think about this match?
Yeah, I hadn't seen their previous match. So when you see a matchup like this and you think, well, this will either work really well or it won't work at all. And it was a lot closer to the former than the latter. I think Davey, as the heel, helped this match a lot. He could bully Jack around. He hit him with some really nasty strikes and suplexes. It's really brutal German, and then this kind of funky arm trap suplex later in the match. I think the match mostly hinged on whether Jack's high flying was clean, and it mostly was, although he did appear to smack his face in the apron during a dive to the floor. Yeah, the DQ finish, I didn't have a big problem with. It was the opener. This is a long-term story they're telling of Jack getting his own team together, so that's fine. And it's kind of the ideal opener in the sense it was like on the cusp of very good and got the show off to a good start, but it wasn't like it was so great like nothing would follow it afterwards. So I thought we were off to a good start here.
Yeah, this match answered some recent criticisms I've had on shows, but it also continued some others. I really liked the opening minutes of this where Davey attacked Jack before the bell and they got into this, I would say, a pretty hot start. And I felt like that start had some of the energy and urgency I think more ROH could have used on their last 2 shows. Some of the matches I felt didn't have quite as much of that urgency. And then the middle comes in like the last show. I get what Davey is doing by slowing things down to get the crowd rooting for the babyface and build to the comeback. But again, I would have liked Davey just to be a little bit meaner here because he has the offense to really torture an underdog babyface that's in Jack's position. He's not bad at it here, but I would have liked to see him make Jack suffer even more, like paste him with more kicks, stretch him harder, things like that. I agree with you, Joe, that I thought Jack, for his part, had some of his best looking offense in a bit. He does this great leap onto the guardrail into a flying kick off of it. He gets a flying knee in this match, which I would say like almost Masato Yoshino level speed and explosiveness, where it just comes out of nowhere real fast. And like you said, Matt, his flying spinning kick he hits in this match, which he does sometimes. A lot of times to do it safely, he doesn't really make good looking contact. Here it looks like he really hit Davey in like the back of the neck. I don't know if that is safe or pleasant for the person taking it, but it sure looked way better than usual this time. But like you said, Joe, it's Jack, so you have to accept the occasional spot that doesn't look good, like that dive to the floor. Not only does he, I think, hit himself, like you said, it barely touches Davey. But overall, I thought this was a very good night for Jack, even if he did get somewhat winded. And I saw that you gift it or gift it, depending on what you want to say, folks. But on Twitter, Jack taking that big German suplex. And I will say it wasn't quite as good as the El Generico taking the Davey Richards German suplex we saw on the very last show, but it's close. It's another very good getting up, as I called on that show. Instead of sandbagging a move, these are guys that are airbagging these Davey Richards German suplexes. And yeah, I didn't like the DQ either. It's not something, I'm going to get too mad at because it didn't happen rarely in Ring of Honor, but it was, it's going to be the first of a couple matches, I think, on this show we see where for some reason Gabe isn't booking a guy in a match where he feels like they can win, but he also doesn't want them to lose. So he has to kind of come up with something to get them out of it. So overall, I'd give this a good. It's a nice, enjoyable opener that doesn't burn the place down, but it does apparently inspire someone to shoot a gun. But I think it gives you a good dose of what you want from each of these guys, kind of stylistically. And two other notes I want to give quickly before we move on. The first is there's a moment in this match where Jack takes off his shirt and he gets horny screams from the crowd, and it caught me off guard, made me laugh because look, like Jack Evans is a cute, attractive, handsome-looking guy. He's in better shape than a lot of us, certainly better shape than me. But like, if sexually attracted to the body of 2007 Jack Evans, you are a lucky person because that is a very obtainable body. Like, you can find that body in a variety of places. So, we should all be so lucky. And my other note is the referee in this match looks startlingly like a young Zach Krager, the cast member of the Weiss Kids, and now a big shot director. If you don't know that, look him up and then watch this match. And it is kind of it was shocking to me. But anyway, I guess it wasn't shocking. Immediately after the match, Roddy gets on the mic and he says, in 2 weeks in Hartford, Connecticut, he will end this once and for all inside a steel cage. He slaps Jack, and he and Rocky Romero put the boots to him until the Resilience run in to make the save. We get a huge Austin Aries chant as the No Remorse Corps flees from them. The Resilience try and help Jack up, but he angrily says, I don't need you guys. I have my own crew coming. So we are, for the fifth time, we're teasing that the crew's coming, but they are actually coming this time. That brings us to the Shimmer title, #1 contendership match. Lacey defeated Daisy Hayes via pinfall in 8 minutes, 9 seconds after she hit the implant DDT. Winner faces Sarah Del Rey for the Shimmer title the next night. Joe, what did you think about this one?
This had one of my favorite tropes where the champion watches from the aisleway. So we saw Sarah Del Rey at the entrance ramp, but she didn't move at all. Like, the only movement at all was like her eyes blinking.
No, so this is maybe a conspiracy theory. I think they showed 2 shots of her. I think it might have been the same shot twice, and the second time they showed it was just to cover for a botch. But I may be wrong.
Yeah, so I was going to say that, Matt, because both times I think they show her, it's like, because remember, these shows were edited in post-production, which means they could have put those shots in anywhere they wanted, and both times they put them when the girls in the match are starting to do a spot. So I was like you, I was going to ask you, like, do you think they're doing that to, like, cover botches?
I heard a boo during one of them, so I think so, yes. But who knows? Who knows?
Well, that's clever editing then, I guess. Anyway, Joe, sorry to interrupt.
No, that's fine. So as far as what we did see and what was not edited off, I thought it was this was short, but still probably a little better than I expected. I liked Lacey's offense a lot. She had some nasty kicks and a nice looking side suplex at one point, and she also looked to smack her head against the guardrail, taking a sliding drop kick. So not a lot. She gets the win here. I don't know why the commentators said the Hayes repeatedly, like Daisy was Bret Hart, but
they do that. That's a thing.
Yeah, I guess that's a thing. So yeah, this was a fine, for where it was slotted on the card.
Yeah, I felt that that was another weird We've been seeing these lately, Joe, in Ring of Honor. Not a ton of them, but some weird WWE tropes, and the repeated shots to the person just standing and watching the match from the entranceway. That's something we don't normally see in ROH, so it was kind of weird to see it here. But I agree with Matt's theory that this was, at least they used the footage they had to maybe hide a couple things, but. I thought this match was pretty middle of the road. It was mid-tempo, not bad, not great. I felt like Daisy got a little overshadowed here. She loses completely clean to the heel, and I felt even within the match, Lacey got more of the spotlight than her because Daisy can do some real eye-catching offense, but I would say other than her flying drop kick, you don't really which she does only in the final minute, you don't really see a lot of her coolest offense or bumping here. Lacey, though, uncorks this really cool spinning axe kick. I can't recall seeing her do it much in ROH, and I do like her Bubba Bomb sit out full Nelson bomb that turns into transitions right into a sitting full Nelson. I think that's a cool move. I like that she does that. I think the smartest thing they did in this match was when Daisy goes for a couple quick roll-ups, they were both in the perfect moments. They weren't just done randomly. The first was when Lacey was distracted, she was mocking Sarah Del Rey, who was standing at the entrance, like we said. And the second time Daisy went to roll up Lacey, it was right after Lacey eye poked her and was about to attempt her finisher, the implant DDT. And what I really liked is both of those moments feel like when a roll up could win a match, because those are moments that are going against the flow of a big moment, or when someone is distracted. If you do those same roll ups randomly 3 minutes into the match, no one buys them. But at least me, it was like, oh, those are really well placed quick roll-ups. But overall, I would say this was a strong average to me, nothing particularly special. We've seen better from them. Everything they did here was fine. There was no botch that we saw, but there probably was one or two that we didn't see. There wasn't any real drudgery. And I guess the only other thing to mention about this match from me would be Jimmy Jacobs is not here. They mentioned that on commentary, that he's rehabbing, getting ready to return, which he will be doing in the ring soon. But Matt, what'd you think?
I agree with basically everything you said, Trevor. But there was one thing that I did find weird. I thought the intensity was pretty good. The one thing I did find weird is near the finish, Lacey at one point blocks a heart punch, goes for a TKO, but Hayes escapes and hits the heart punch, which has been positioned as one of Hayes' biggest moves. But then Lacey basically just doesn't sell it and hits a lung blower in the implant for the DDT. Like, it was just strange at the finish that Lacey no-sold one of Daisy Hayes' biggest moves. Like, I just that couldn't have been what they were intending, but that's how it ended up. Like, it wasn't even like she had to then, like, in a couple minutes reverse something. It's just Daisy hit the heart punch, Lacey brushed it off and hit her moves and won. Very strange to me.
Yeah, that was weird. And again, kind of feeds into the whole thing where it really felt like Lacey was kind of low-key dominating this match a bit. But that'll take us to the third match on the main card. Pure Wrestling Rules. It's been a while since we've seen one of these. Chris Hero scored to the ring by the whole Sweet and Sour Incorporated entourage of Bobby Dempsey, Larry Sweeney, Sarah Del Rey, and Tank Tolan. Well, Hero defeated Nigel McGuinness via submission in 20 minutes even when he made him tap to the Hangman's Clutch. Before the match could even begin, Larry got on the mic and is soon greeted by "shut the fuck up" chants. Chris Hero says, "That's way too vulgar." Larry says, "What we've got here is a pure wrestling contest," and he immediately hands the mic off to Ref Todd Sinclair so he can do his usual reading of the pure wrestling rules. Sweeney then says he has a few things to say. He calls Nigel a limey scumbag and says he and Hero have come up with a few pure wrestling commandments. Number 1, thou shalt not interrupt the magnificent athletic displays of an athlete the caliber of Chris Hero. Hero then reads commandment number 2, thou shalt not be British, otherwise said British person forfeits all rope breaks. Then Sweeney comes back and he reads commandment number 3, thou shalt keep your dirty, limey hands off the likes of Sweet and Sour Larry Sweeney. And then Hero reads the last commandment, his personal favorite, he says, thou shalt not use closed fists or clotheslines. So, funny little thing there. On recent episodes, we've talked about how Chris Hero's 2007 act, although great, it could sometimes be a little much for us. Like, it could detract from matches that could have been great bell to bell. It kind of sucks a lot of the oxygen of matches up sometimes. This is a match that is almost all Chris Hero shtick, and it worked for me. But before I tell you why it worked for me overall, I will tell you about the part that didn't, which is, this is one of those matches where you read it on like Cage Match or something, it goes 20 minutes. Really, in your mind, you should think it's 15 minutes because the first 5 minutes is mostly Hero showboating and the first instance of the Project 161 angle hijacking a main card. So we've tracked Project 161 on recent shows. The mystery angle that was supposed to invade reality. You know, we read a listener note about how an earlier show had he went to the bathroom. There were messages written in the venue's bathroom mirrors. We talked about how the angle where Project 161 hijacked the ROH message board and Gabe wrote an angry work shoot message about like, this is real. You're getting into my real life now. But tonight's the first night where the shenanigans invaded the main card. As early in this match, the lights go off, and we hear a voice over the PA say, Project 161 is coming. Project 161 is real. Project 161, be ready. Project 161, Project 161. And this guy just keeps saying Project 161 over and over again.
What a good impression, Trevor.
Even as the lights turn back on. The match is stopped. The wrestlers act, again, we're supposed to act, they're acting like this is a shoot, I guess, or, well, they're acting.
Yeah, they act like it was, they act like it was a fan that was doing it. Like some fans are trying to get themselves over at the expense of the show, like that.
Yeah, they're acting befuddled, I guess would be the word for it. To me, I felt like this was an example of something we've seen throughout Gabe's ROH tenure, which is his temptation to occasionally do work shoot angles and how it's usually bad. It's like a lot of Gabe's worst moments where the idea is good, but the execution is awful. The voice, I think, also might have been Tyler Black. I'm not sure. I don't know if either of you guys have an opinion on that. It did kind of sound like Tyler Black. I don't know if they would have had him come in just to say that, but the voice.
I don't know. Not Muppet-esque enough, I feel like.
Yeah. Well, whoever the voice was, it is so fucking corny. It came off as goofy and funny rather than like, I think the intent, which was probably edgy and sinister. And, anyway, Hero almost instantly redeems this because he then, right after the lights come on, the Project 161 thing stops. He has Bobby Cruz announce that he would like to inform Ref Todd Sinclair that during the blackout, Nigel used all 3 of his rope breaks. And I have to admit, that made me laugh out loud. So the good about this match is, while it's Hero shtick, the novelty for me was really high because of the setting for that shtick this time. The whole story of this match is Nigel was the longest reigning pure champion ever, in large part because he was a heel then and he cheated and used the pure rules against his opponents. And now Nigel's a babyface and Hero is in a pure rules match with him and he's the heel using the rules against Nigel. And I think if you've been a long-time ROH viewer that saw the Nigel reign, that's a really fun twist, actually. This match has things like, this is maybe one of the only times in wrestling you'll see a heel manager put his client's opponent's foot on the ropes, because Swing Star Incorporated burns 2 of Nigel's rope breaks by putting Nigel's foot on the bottom rope as the ref counts near falls. Nigel's other rope break gets burned when he uses closed fist punches, which are always illegal in pure wrestling matches. And Hero baits Nigel into doing one because he hits Nigel with one when the ref can't see it, and then Nigel immediately retaliates when the ref can, which is a classic technique Nigel used often when he was the pure champ. So it's a good storytelling match in that sense. I also like that they had an extended section that was all about them trading arm locks, and they used it to show that Nigel was a way better technical wrestler than Hero because he always had an easy time getting out of Hero's holds, and Hero always had like a much longer, more difficult time getting out of Nigel's. And I felt like overall, Hero was really in his element here as a performer. The crowd loves this act. We've been talking about it on recent shows. They really have been loving it recently. They do dueling chants during the match. They're even kind of half for Hero. They chant Bobby Dempsey at once, so Bobby's act is getting over. After Sweeney puts Nigel's foot on the rope once, Hero has Bobby Cruz announce that Hero only had him in a hammerlock, so that was a waste of a rope break. Again, this is a match where the comedy really did work for me. At one point, Hero has Nigel in a really minor hold near the ropes, and he wants Nigel to use up a rope break. So he says, grab the rope. It hurts. Like, I don't think he's telling him, like, I'm hurting you right now. We get a moment where Bobby Dempsey is told to do squats into an elbow drop on Nigel on the floor, but then Nigel gets his revenge later in the match when he tosses Bobby, like, ole style on the floor into Hero, and Hero almost gets counted out as he like hilariously sells being trapped under Dempsey. Like he sells it is so fucking ridiculous the way he sells it. He sells like he's under probably like a 280-pound man, and he sells like he's under a 1-ton weight. Like everyone has to help get Bobby up, and he's panicking. Again, it's over the top in a way that worked for me. So overall, I would say this match was a strong good to me, 3.5 stars. It's goofy. It's far more story than exciting wrestling, but on this night, I thought it was the right story for these 2 characters in the middle of the feud. Maybe if it wasn't Nigel playing off his past, I wouldn't have liked this as much, but it worked for me on this night. Matt, what did you think?
I definitely wouldn't say it's a 3.5 star match. I could see why someone would enjoy this, because there was some decent, funny stuff, like, but it didn't feel like a match to me. Like it felt like just like a pure like 20-minute comedy bit, which is just so many interruptions that it had no flow to it. So if you enjoyed the comedy, like I could accept that. I think I still would have rather seen a match, like an actual match between these two guys, but you can't argue that Hero is not doing his, not playing his character well, and and just like making every moment maximally funny for what he's trying to do. Even just at the beginning when they're doing the list of pure wrestling commandments, and Hero goes, commandment numero 2. And it's like, he's mixing, the Spanish, and then you expect him to say dos, but instead he says two. Like, even just like that was very funny. And yeah, like use the rope break, it hurts. That was very funny. There was also like when, it was only a hammerlock spot where Hero makes Cruz tell McGinnis that was only a hammerlock and a waste of a rope break. I thought it was funny, but also silly. Like, first of all, A, why would Bobby Cruz listen to him to do that? And B, why act like, maybe this is like Meltzer brain, but like, why tell the audience that a hammerlock can't submit somebody? You know what I mean? Like both of those things crossed my mind. As far as Project 161, it was just really scary. I got real scared. Like, Project 161. That's scary. But yeah, otherwise, that's how I feel. Yeah, it was funny. I still don't feel like I could rate it as a match. I would have rather have seen a match, but I get what you're saying.
Joe, what did you think about all the haha? And also, were you terrified of Project 161?
I couldn't see what I had a bad vantage point where I was sitting. I couldn't see, like, I just heard some guy yelling. I don't know if it was a group of people or just one guy there. I don't remember that, but it is funny. Like, they didn't edit that off the DVD. Like, just, think about it. Like, someone takes over your show screaming about something, and you're like, better leave that in.
Yeah. In kayfabe, like, this is pre-recorded. Exactly.
Yeah. They were too busy editing botches out of the women's match, I guess. They used their botch budget, removal budget to take care of that, so they had to leave this in. But no, I had a lot of fun during this. This was just like this was like a sports entertainment version of a pure wrestling match, which I don't think we've seen because it goes against the whole point of the rules. But I thought this was a lot of fun. You covered a lot of the very funny spots, like using the rope breaks during the blackout, and just a lot of funny bits. The bit where they put Nigel's foot on the ropes during the pin attempt, like Nigel wasn't kicking out at that point. That was a really deep cover. It was like, I don't know, just like win the match at that point. You don't have to use extra shenanigans. But no, I had a lot of fun during this. I thought it was it was long, but it was good and enjoyable. So we're on a roll for this show.
And I do always like to point this out, not to pick on people, but we usually we'll find good quotes from the Observer and PW Insider, Mike Johnson, occasionally the Torch, and Brian Alvarez is rarer. And a lot of times Brian's batting average on Ring of Honor reporting is, I think, a little bit lower. And we get an example of that here because Brian wrote about this match in Figure 4 Weekly. Apparently, the deal was that Hero claimed to the ref that Nigel had used all his rope breaks when the lights were out, and the ref believed him. The ref did not believe him. He didn't use up any of his rope breaks.
Yeah.
I don't know who told him that or how you could misinterpret that, because he does get rope breaks later used up that are announced by Bobby Cruz. But yeah, that it did not happen.
Right. He also said at the beginning of the match that Nigel forfeited all of his rope breaks by way of being British, and the referee also did not follow his instructions there.
Yeah, exactly. And Joe, I also thought I got to shout you out. I thought that was a great point too. About I didn't even think of that. Which is, if you're going to sell this as a work shoot, since everyone knows these Ring of Honor shows aren't live, doesn't it completely destroy it when you don't edit out this crazy hijacking of your show off of the DVD? Considering that ROH in the past has edited things off of DVDs that did not work, like whole wrestler appearances that didn't work. So yeah, I thought that was a good point.
Vomiting that didn't work.
Exactly. I mean, they literally had a DVD, ROH Uncensored, where one of the selling points was here's like the Conan appearance, the first Conan appearance, or the first and the ICP appearance of and the vomiting of here's all the things we edited off the DVDs. Now could you pay us some money for them? So, so a couple other quick notes. This was, as I mentioned, the first time the Project 161 stuff invaded the main show, and so we got some coverage from the newsletters, and the early reviews were not good. We'll go to the Observer first. Dave wrote, both nights on this weekend, they did an angle called Project 161, which will be explained and really start on September 15th in Chicago. Both nights during matches, the lights went out and a voice on the intercom kept saying, Project 161. It's an internet-based angle that sounds to me something like the NWO angle in WCW, so it may include some of the wrestlers who were regulars that haven't been around for a while, feuding with the company's internal structure. Not quite, Dave. Anyway, Dave continues, on the website, Gabe Sapolsky acted like it was a personal issue with him, so he may become a character. Thankfully, that also does not happen. Dave continues, almost everything I heard as far as reaction to it was negative, as the common theme is people watch ROH to avoid that kind of stuff.
Bingo.
And then we go to Figure 4 Weekly, where Brian Alvarez wrote, apparently there was a guy in a Project 161 shirt with a megaphone running around all night and another, quote, weird-looking guy, unquote, in the parking lot handing out flyers.
Yeah, this is why I'm guessing it was not Tyler Black. Someone would have recognized him.
Yeah. I'll be interested to see where this one goes, because it doesn't seem to be lighting the world on fire after the initial insanity involving the fan page and Gabe losing his mind. So yeah, this is one of those angles where whatever it becomes eventually, again, like I said, it's another example of Gabe trying something kind of different or work shooty, and immediately people just going, oh, this is corny. So, which is sad, because there is a lot of potential in this, but the way they handled it on this weekend, corny. After the match, Tank Tolan has Bobby cannonball Nigel in the corner, but Nigel dodges at the last second and then hits him with a jawbreaker lariat before Tank flees. And then I thought another funny moment in the aisleway, a happy Larry Sweeney like talks to Tank. He goes, "High five! It wasn't you!" Like he's celebrating that you didn't get hit with it. So that's worthy of celebration. I thought again, I've been a little hard on some of the Chris Hero stuff because we've seen a lot of the tropes over and over again. This was a lot of fresh comedy on this one. I get, Matt, what you're saying about it being like still maybe a little too much and not enough wrestling, but the comedy did hit for me on this night by a very high batting average.
They are funny. They are funny guys. I mean, for sure.
Yeah. We cut to backstage where El Generico is lacing up Kevin Steen's boots as Steen sits in a wheelchair that was presumably from the same medical classroom the Briscoes were in earlier. Steen tells Generico to tie his boots tighter and that you missed a lace hole. Steen says, "I'm not paying you for nothing." Well, I'm not paying you. But anyway, so Steen says tonight they take on the Briscoes in a street fight, which he really likes, but it's a shame that the tag titles are on the line. But he gets why it had to be non-sanctioned, as ROH doesn't want to be held responsible for what he's going to do to the Briscoes. Kevin says they're going to enjoy making the Briscoes bleed and squeal in pain, and the wheelchair that he's sitting in right now is what the Briscoes will be leaving in. Steen then says to Generico, "Take me to the bathroom. Now!" And Generico wheels him away, with the final line being that Steen tells Generico, "You're going in the wrong direction." And then he just says this weird non sequitur where he goes, "There's grape Gatorade over there." And that's how the promo ends. He's just like, I don't know if he's trying to say that's the wrong direction because I see grape Gatorade, or if he like wants the grape Gatorade. I don't know. But this was one of the funnier first hours of Ring of Honor that you'll ever see. And they had some really good comic minds so on these events. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts about this.
It was longer than the Briscoes promo. I didn't love it quite as much, but Steen's promos are always great. He was really good. I like how well they're using props on this show.
Again, Gallagher, Carrot Top, they'd all be proud. That brings us to maybe even Gallagher too. That brings us to the That brings us to the six-man mayhem match. Matt Cross defeated Brent Albright, Delirious, Eddie Edwards, Jigsaw, and Pele Primo in 10 minutes, 41 seconds when he pinned Edwards after a shooting star leg drop. So your classic six-man scramble, throw a lot of guys in their match. Matt, what did you think?
I definitely liked this a lot more than the one on the last show. There was some, decent character stuff early on. First of all, Primo has a new trophy, or is it just the broken old trophy? I couldn't tell.
I think it's the broke one because I think it had a little standy guy on top, and I don't think it's on top anymore. So I think this might just literally be they're not going to buy him a third trophy, so it might just be he's using the broken one.
And he really needs that Matt F trophy, but I'm not going to give it to him 2 shows in a row. Sorry, they gave Albright a lot of chances to get some big offense in, no selling other guys, but obviously it makes sense because Albright's not going to win this match because he he chases out Delirious. But once they get into the hot and heavy stuff near the end, I thought this got really, really fun. Like just I with the the big trading of spots and reversals. The Delirious. I mean, I wrote down a list of big spots near the end, like Delirious headbutting Edwards coming off the ropes and hitting a panic attack. Delirious hitting Edwards with shadows over hell, but then Jigsaw breaking it up with a top rope double stomp, and then Jigsaw super kicking Delirious out of the ring, and then hitting a big dive, and then Cross and Albright do a series of reversals until Albright drives Cross face first into the mat, and then Primo tries a monkey flip on Albright, but Albright blocks it. And Primo is able to arm drag Albright, charge at him until Albright belly to bellies him into the corner. Then Albright catches Jigsaw, springboarding with a half Nelson suplex. Then Albright slingshots Edwards into the corner and immediately hits the half Nelson suplex. Albright chases Delirious to the back. Then Cross hits Edwards with the shooting star leg drop for the win. Like I said, I thought Primo looked good. I thought Edwards looked very good. I thought Jigsaw looked very good. I thought Cross actually had one of his best highlight reels in this. He does his signature like dive fake out on one side, then hitting a dive on the other side of the ring. The shooting star leg drop that he won the match with looked really good. I really thought this was one of the more fun versions of this kind of match that we've seen in a while. Nothing that's going to, stick in anyone's mind or anything, but like a good solid, like 3.25, maybe 3.5 if you like this kind of thing match. Just, it clicked for what it was.
Joe, what'd you think? And also I have to give you props, Joe, because you actually got us an unintentional wrestler quote about this match, because you gift the shooting star leg drop finish from Matt Cross, and Andrew Evett, noted indie wrestler, actually replied to that and said that he had tried that spot a couple times and it hurt so much that's why he didn't do it regularly. So we actually got a little insight to maybe why that is such a cool yet rare move in pro wrestling, thanks to you. Well, what'd you think about the match?
Yeah, so much of the show is so vivid to me, being there live, but I really didn't remember this match, and it just wasn't super memorable to me overall. There were parts that were good. I liked a lot of the individual aspects of it. I liked M-Dog's flying or Matt Cross, I should say, who I thought he was Austin Aries when he first made his entrance, because he looked, because the lights are down, he's mostly in shadows. They look similarly from a stature standpoint. I was like, geez, Austin Aries coming out fourth at a scramble. But no, that was his flying looks good. Always funny to see Eddie Edwards with the dreadlocks or braids. I guess someone corrected me online, but he had the hair and all that. I thought Pelly did a good job playing underdog. He took some big bumps, and Jigsaw looked good as well. The Brent Albright Delirious stuff didn't really land with me, especially weird because Albright was getting a title shot at the next show, and then like he can't even win like a scramble. Like, I know he left during the match, but it's just weird. Like you're in a scramble and you don't like dominate or win, which I thought was just bizarre. But there was some good action in here, but kind of a replacement level scramble for me.
Yeah, I'm more with Joe than Matt. I like this. I didn't hate this, but I like this significantly. I think I was significantly less enthusiastic for this match than you. The most interesting thing about this match for me may have been the booking, because it's one show after we talked about how Eric Stevens got the flip switch, where all of a sudden he's been losing a lot. All of a sudden, we got to start giving him some wins. We'll have him win a big scramble. Well, the very next show they do the same thing for Matt Cross. They have him win his stablemate, have him win a random ass 6-way. I think winning matches like this, these big scrambles that are usually forgotten very quickly, it can be part of a push that works, like part of a win streak or your first big win as an ROH student, like Pele Primo. But in a vacuum, most of these multi-way matches are so throwaway that I don't think people remember them minutes after they're over. Like, Joe, you just kind of made that point for me where you said a lot of the show was vivid. You didn't remember anything about this match, really. On the other end, Brent Albright's weird build towards the world title match he's getting the night after this show continues, and it's weird. This match was weird to me in that sense. In the last couple of shows, his push seems to have slowed right before he's getting the biggest match of his run so far, and he's also selling far more than I've ever seen him do so far in ROH. And Brent Albright getting less of a push and selling more would normally be things I might enjoy from him, but this is like the precise wrong time for him to be doing those two things when he's got a world title match coming up. On the last show we talked about, he lost in the second round of a 4-round tournament in a match where Jack Evans beat him in a strike exchange and survived his submission finisher for what felt like 900% longer than any other wrestler has. And here, the night before his world title match, he's in a random mid-card 6-way that he does not win, but he's also doing mild boilerplate comedy, with Delirious. He is kicking some butts, but he's doing some comedy with Delirious. He's bumping pretty big for Pele on some moves. He's bumping in this big, almost comical way that I feel like we haven't seen from him before. It's not Shawn Michaels against Hulk Hogan level, but is kind of broad and vulnerable in a way that seems to go against everything they've been building him up for so far. And then we get the end of the match, which is what I alluded to earlier, the second finish of the night where it felt like Gabe just didn't want someone to lose a match, but yet he also didn't want them to win for some reason. So we have Delirious goad Albright into chasing him to the back and taking them both out of the match, which makes no sense from Delirious's perspective. Like, why take yourself out of the match? You can't win. It's not a tag team match. But again, the non-kayfabe reason obviously would be so Brent Albright doesn't have to technically lose this match. As for the match itself, I thought it was just fine. It is very ROH multi-man with everyone pairing off at the start for short sequences, a dive or two. The match breaks down to a wilder, more exciting stretch where everyone is ignoring tags. Except I felt like this time the wilder breakdown came when there's only 2 or 3 minutes left in the match. But I thought it was fine. Everyone looked fine. Matt Cross, I would say, had a performance that was very representative of his entire ROH run, where he hits 2 or 3 amazing spots like that beautiful shooting star leg drop that finished the match. But when he's not doing those 2 or 3 highlight of the match spots, I still feel like he's almost invisible. Like he has so little ring presence where he can do incredible things, but when he's not doing those incredible things, he doesn't really command your attention. So I would say this was a high average for me. There was nothing painful about watching this, but I felt like we had seen this done way better and without the weird booking choices. But you know what? That's why you, the home viewer, if there's any reason to watch this show, it's to watch a 6-man scramble in the mid-card to see if you more agree with Matt or me. That's the main reason to watch this show.
On the bright side, it is a short match.
Yes, you can definitely get this in.
Well, I was going to say, our catchphrase on Through the Years. Viewers, you be the judge.
I was going to say that's my catchphrase. It's short. So
no, I believe that's your lover's catchphrase.
Oh, you got me. So that brings us to the resilience of Austin Aries and Eric Stevens defeating the No Remorse core of Rocky Romero and Roderick Strong in 18 minutes 5 seconds when Austin Aries pinned Rocky Romero after a 450. Joe, what'd you think? Did you confuse Austin Aries for Matt Cross when he first came out?
No, I knew who was who at this point.
Okay.
Cross worked
Good.
double duty on this show. I liked Roddy doing the classic, the crowd's booing me, so I'll put a towel over my ears to block it out bit, which is always a short-term solution at best. I thought this match was okay. Just felt like something was missing in a bit. The story was Roddy was avoiding Aries until Aries was getting back in the ring after a brawl, so Roddy kicked the bottom rope to do a low blow. I don't know if Todd Sinclair was looking when that happened, but I know some wrestlers just do it right, like in front of the ref. Like I think a Dragon Gate match yesterday. They do it like in front of the ref, and it's like, I know you're not making contact, but that's a low blow. Like I don't know. So I'll assume Todd Sinclair was otherwise occupied. The No Remorse core takeover. There's a funny bit where Rocky hits an apron drop kick, so he's laying on the floor, and the ref sees him on the ground. So Roddy just yells out, "He slipped!" like as if he had wiped out there. And Roddy also tried to do the fake tag where you come in the ring and you do a clap, and the ref turns around and assumes you tagged your partner. Except Rocky was like 6 inches away from him when he ran in, and Todd Sinclair was staring at him the whole time. So I don't know what the point of that was. The match is going along okay until Aries I think he hits a corner drop kick, and I think he appears to blow out his knee because he's just hobbling around at that point. Stevens just comes in the ring and takes over, doesn't even tag or anything like that. But he does manage to hit the 450 for the win. Like I said, it was okay. It was a good finishing stretch. The crowd was really quiet at points. I don't know if that was a matter of they weren't into faction warfare or they just weren't caught up on the story yet. because of the nature of storytelling. But no, I mean, this was okay, but not another scintillating chapter in faction warfare.
Yeah, this match got derailed when Aries, I thought he appeared to legitimately hurt his ankle on the floor minutes into this match. And then what you talked about, Joe, where he hits the drop kick right near the end, I feel like that was him really, however bad it was before, he made it worse doing that. And I would say when he hurts his ankle in the first few minutes on the floor, what we get following that is a match that I would say is 80% or more made up of Roddy and Romero getting heat on the Brazilians. And Aries is the face in peril. He makes a somewhat abrupt one-move comeback and makes an anticlimactic hot tag to Eric Stevens. And after some brief offense from Stevens, he then immediately starts to play the face in peril until he makes a hot tag to Aries. And so what we get is basically back-to-back heat segments. And the work within those heat segments isn't bad, but it's just I felt like a little too much. Like it was a little too much heat. Maybe that's what kind of made the crowd a little more subdued. And, long heat segments or back-to-back heat segments even, they can be redeemed a lot of the time if you have a great hot tag where, sometimes I can watch a tag match where I see the heels controlling for too long and then the faces make their comeback and it's so hot and so great. I'm like, well, actually that heat segment wasn't too long because this is completely justifying it. This one doesn't because unfortunately in this match, like Joe mentioned, Aries is hurt. So when he makes the tag to make the big hot tag to start the stretch run, his ankle is fucked to the point where there are points where he's hobbling on one foot almost. And so he starts his run of hot tag offense and you see him go for that classic Aries drop kick to the face of opponent that's standing in the corner and he can't get above Romero's waist. Like his ankle just gives out. And immediately if you watch, he rolls to like the ring apron and he waves to Stevens like, basically, it's as if he's saying, you've got to take over the hot tag for me. Like, I'm hurt right now. And Stevens does. Stevens immediately comes in, even though he just tagged out, and he starts doing the hot tag for Aries. Stevens is making his own hot tag now. And except because Stevens is wrestling 1-on-2, very quickly the heels regain control yet again until a little bit later when Aries finally comes back in. He's okay enough to do a few moves for the finish. He hits the brainbuster, and miraculously, considering how bad his ankle seems to legitimately be hurt, he does hit his 450. I think different wrestlers could handle ankle injury better, and that's not saying, because Aries isn't a good enough worker. What I mean by that is so much of Aries' best offense comes from really explosive movement where he's pushing off hard off his feet. Think his heat-seeking missile tope where he goes real fast, or that corner drop kick. And so more than most wrestlers, I feel like when he loses that ability to run at top speed and jump really high, and you really notice it on a hot tag, I feel like if like Minoru Suzuki hurt his ankle in a match, he could still do 95% of what he usually does. You wouldn't even notice. Aries is a wrestler who really needs his ankles more than most wrestlers, and most wrestlers need their ankles. But I will also say I will continue to complain that I think Eric Stevens is bumping and selling too much at this stage of his ROH run, but he's pretty darn good at it because there's this moment where Rocky Romero does this flying knee that he often does. And it's a move where more than most moves, it really lives or dies on how your opponent sells it. And Stevens here takes it so good. He flies into the corner, lands on his ass, and basically takes a buckle bump off like a flying jumping knee to the chest. It is a great bump. He made Rocky look like $1 million on that spot. And then Rocky and Roddy later, they also try the spot where Roddy slingshots Aries into a flying knee from Rocky. And in theory, it's an awesome spot, but it just doesn't hit clean enough here. And it's one of those spots where it makes you sad because you see the spot and you can instantly see the version in your head that hit perfectly, and you go, shit, that would have looked even cooler. I wish they had pulled that off.
I wrote the same thing about that spot. Like it just did not look as spectacular as it sounded, but it sounded really cool.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess another thing I want to mention is we've seen multiple matches lately, including this one, where Roddy is doing everything he can to avoid Aries until Aries is hurt. And that's heel wrestling 101, where, you avoid your opponent, you tag out and tags and stuff, so you don't have to face them until they're already hurt. But that's usually heel wrestling 101 before a first singles match between two guys, or when a heel has lost to a babyface before. Roddy and Aries had already had a singles match just months before this, and Roddy won that match clean. So I guess in theory he can still be scared of Aries, but it's like I feel like Roddy's playing chicken shit a little too much for a guy that you beat cleanly this year. Like, you can, in storyline, you can handle this guy. You don't have to be this terrified of him. But overall, I thought this was a mild above average for some perfectly solid work throughout. But the layout of the match was unsatisfying to me. It was too much heat, and I feel like, you know, Aries and Stevens win, so it's Gabe continuing to try and really on a dime turn around the Brazilians and really push them all of a sudden. But because this match is 80% them getting their asses kicked and then winning out of nowhere at the end, it didn't feel like the triumphant resilience is turning the corner the way the announcers were trying to sell it as. But again, I say all this saying, who knows what this match would have been if Aries didn't actually seemingly get hurt. But Matt, what'd you think?
See, I mean, I get what you're saying about the Aries injury, but I chalked up, you know, whatever was lacking in this match more to like the idea that maybe they were holding back a little bit because they had some big, crazy physical brawl planned for the next night in Philly. And I still kind of think that. I still think they were sort of saving themselves a little bit. I thought the No Remorse course still, like, were doing a good job being classic heels throughout the match. I do agree that the heat segments lasted too long, and once they finally picked things up at the end, it didn't pick up quite enough, never got out of that, you know, gear 2 or gear 1.5 or whatever. I will say that I liked when Stevens headbutted Romero with his mohawk, and they acted like it was extra painful, and Leonard was like, must be something in that mohawk. I wish they had stuck with that a little bit longer, just the deadly mohawk of doom, but they did not.
As someone that spiked his hair with hair glue when he was a teen a few regrettable times, I can tell you can get those things hard enough to put an eye out.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Nigel probably had, like, when at his mohawkiest, probably would have been able to do that as well. I would not want to wrestle somebody with a spiky mohawk. But yeah, I still think that that's probably what they were doing, was saving themselves for the next night a little bit. Although I agree they could have done it better, and I'm sure that Aries being not at 100% did not help.
Yeah, there is, again, a night of, this was one of the funnier Ring of Honor shows. There was a night where a lot of really good, broad, obvious comedy. I thought there was a nice underrated moment on the floor. Before the match even starts, Roddy's on the floor and he's covering his ears because the crowd's doing their usual Roderick, you know, heckling chant. And so as Roddy has his ears covered, if you listen, you can hear one fan say, "You can still hear me." And Roddy turns around to him and goes, "How do you know?" And I thought that was an underrated, funny moment of like, you wouldn't, if you can, like, you just proved you can hear him. I thought that was a nice underrated comedy moment. But so immediately after the match, Davey Richards runs in, and he and the rest of the No Remorse Corps put the boots to Stevens and Aries. Matt Cross runs in, and he also gets beat down until Jack Evans runs in and cleans house single-handedly. So, you know, they're really trying to build up Jack tonight, although they not enough to give him a clean win tonight. We then join Shane Hagedorn backstage. He says for the last year, he's learned a lot from Adam Pearce, and one lesson he learned is that there's always a calm before the storm. Shane says, we haven't seen Pearce in a bit, but trust him when he says from Tokyo to Boston, Pearce knows everything going on in Ring of Honor. Right now, we're in that calm before the storm. So just trying to keep that Pearce presence going before they set up the incredible Hangman 3. And that brings us to Bryan Danielson defeating Matt Sydal, who was escorted to the ring by the whole Sweet and Sour entourage, except I don't think Chris Hero was there. I don't remember.
I think it was just Sweeney. That was,
yeah, it was only Sweeney.
Yeah, you know what? Cage Match lied to me, and my memory lied to me. So thank you guys for correcting. Bryan Danielson won via submission in 16 minutes 40 when he made Sydal tap out to elbows while trapped in a triangle choke. Before the match starts, we get some more mic work. Larry gets on the mic and he says he and Brian have some unfinished business because 2 weeks ago in that $10,000 8-man tag, Larry volunteered the services of Matt Sydal, the number one commodity in professional wrestling today. Their team won, and so they have a share coming to them. He says since a Briscoe took off during the match, one of their partners, Larry says there should be no money coming to that Briscoe, which means 1/3 of the money should be coming to him. He says that's $3,333, and then Larry pauses and goes, 34 cents, which gets a reaction from the crowd that he wants that extra cent. Danielson says Sydal only gets $3,333.33. And then Larry throws a tantrum over this 1 cent. Brian says, Larry knows that as wrestlers, they don't get retirement funds. So Brian did the smart thing. He put the money in the bank. He invested it. It's getting interest. And he swears that when it comes out, Sydal will have some retirement money. And in response, Larry has one question for Brian. Does he like cheese? Because does he want some cheese to go with his wine? I don't give a crap about your retirement or the fact that you have no money. Larry says he has money, Sydal has money, and Brian has their money, and they want it. Brian says he will give them the money right after the show if Matt Sydal can beat him tonight. But if Brian wins, he wants both their shares. Sydal protests to Larry. He wants his money. He earned it. Brian asks if Larry doesn't believe in his guy, if Larry doesn't believe in himself. He says, take the deal. Larry then gets, he's had his, confidence challenge, so Larry does take the deal. He says, I'm at the Kentucky Derby with the number one seeded horse, and I'm not worried at all. And then afterwards, if you listen closely, you can hear Sydal say to Larry, don't fire me if I don't win, okay? Which I thought that was a very Trevor Day, Matt Feuerstein thing to say, like very unconfident, like pre-selling the possible letdown, like please don't get mad if I don't do this, which again, another nice touch on the show, a little comedy. So this match fascinated me. On paper, this match is a heel in Matt Sydal versus a tweener, or if not a tweener, a heel so beloved he might as well have been a tweener in Bryan Danielson.
He was definitely a baby face on this show, which is very weird, but yeah.
But exactly. In structure, this match is wrestled not like that. This match is wrestled like Bryan Danielson is a grizzled 25-year heel veteran who somehow is getting cheered, brutalizing a babyface young boy prospect. Because Bryan, I would say, we talk about percentages of matches taken, like the last match. Bryan, I would say, takes 85% of this match. I would go further than the last match. And the 15% Sydal gets is so scattered at times it barely feels like it's happening. There are at least 5 or 6 times in this match where just when Sydal hits something and you think he's going to go on a run of offense, Bryan cuts him off. It's like, no, you get one move, and now I'm back. I always think the best version of Bryan is when he wrestles with a mean streak, and he is vicious here. The way he treats Sydal in the opening minutes, I would say, is almost Jack Evans match-esque. He has Sydal in a cravat early on, and he spins Matt around in the air by his fucking head and neck only. He puts him in a variation of a clover leaf, and he bends him really far back, again, like a Jack Evans almost level of bending. He starts kicking Sydal in the face at one point while he's screaming, "You want your money?" And Danielson is just the biggest, meanest asshole to ever live in this match to a guy he has real no issue with in storyline. And it's also weird because Sweeney, though he's at ringside, he never interferes in this match. Sydal, even though he's a heel, never cheats in this match. Instead, it's just like Bryan torturing Sydal with submissions, and Sydal, his selling in this match, in the moment at least, is fantastic. I don't think we've ever seen someone sell Bryan's Romero special as well as Sydal does here. Matt is fucking screaming in pain in it, in a really just compelling way. And later on, Bryan goes to put him in another submission, and you can hear Sydal say, "Oh, this will hurt," before it gets put on. And then when it's put on, you hear him scream, "Somebody help me!" in a way that's really kind of helpless, oh man. And it's captivating stuff, but again, it's weird because you're feeling sympathy for Sydal, and he's supposed to be the heel in this match. And another thing I mentioned before is that Danielson is on the record as saying he liked to test wrestlers in matches, and this is a match where it feels like that's exactly what he's doing. There are 1 or 2 months where Sydal fires up with strikes that are a little harder than I'm used to seeing from Sydal, where I'm thinking, okay, maybe he's kind of responding, maybe he's getting tested and responding. But for the most part, Sydal's offense felt more like his normal stuff, but I enjoyed that too because I felt there was a fun contrast between Bryan's offense here, which is very gritty, very ouchy, for lack of a better word, and Sydal's, which is prettier and lighter in a way. So I thought that was an interesting contrast, actually. There is one moment that isn't prettier light, though, which is Seidel often does this outside in drop kick to the chest where he has his opponent sitting in the corner and then he stands on the apron and basically throws himself over the top rope back into the ring. And before he even lands, he transitions into a drop kick to his opponent's chest as they're sitting on the mat. And when they're setting it up this time, I felt like, oh, Brian isn't sitting like Seidel's opponents usually do. He's sitting lower and he's kind of crooked and his head's right against the bottom turnbuckle. And I thought, this is going to be weird. And sure enough, Seidel's dropkick, which normally hits a guy in the chest, it hits Brian right in the throat and chin, which could not have been the way they drew it up, but painful looking. Overall, I'd give this a strong good. Like, this is a strong 3.5 stars to me. 3.5 stars is usually my floor for Danielson matches. Yet I wasn't disappointed here because it didn't feel like they were aiming for a 4-star kind of match. I think if you come into this match expecting a back and forth battle of relative equals with a big dramatic trading of finishers, you're going to be disappointed. But if you come in this expecting to see a very high talent version of a veteran introducing a rookie to the business in a harsh way, which is not what you'd expect going into this match in 2007, I think you'll really dig this, even if it's really surprising that's the way they took this match. But Matt, what'd you think?
Do you think that they laid this match out this way because Seidel was on his way out? I'm not sure. Sorry.
I was just going to say that's a good point too, right? Because we should know this is Seidel's third last match in Ring of Honor. He wrestles the next night, then he misses a double. He takes off the next double shot. He doesn't do the Friday show after that, and then his farewell is like a DVD match on the Man Up pay-per-view, I think.
Yeah, because normally you would think he just turned heel not too long ago, and this is one of his first big singles matches as a heel in ROH. Obviously he'd been kind of a heel for a while, but you know what I mean, the official heel turn with joining Sweet and Sour Ring. You'd think this would be a big competitive match between these two guys, and obviously it was what you said. I compared it to the Jack Evans matches too, only more drawn out, I guess I would say. And it was a really good display of rough technical wrestling by Danielson. You mentioned that Danielson was sort of like the grizzled heel that gets cheered. Of course, in the promo, he was a total babyface, which is weird because he was such a sniveling heel on the last show.
Well, I was going to say, do you think that's a babyface? Do you think that's meant to be him disingenuously saying that I'm investing the money? Or do you think he's on it? Do you believe the Bryan Danielson character really was investing Matt Seidel's money?
I don't know, but the fact that he was doing it to Larry Sweeney makes him still seem like a babyface either way. Yeah. You know what I mean?
That makes this all weird.
Yeah, it was definitely whatever your case. The tone was very different than the one he projected on the Race to the Top Night 2, where he was just like a goofball, 2000 Kurt Angle style heel, you know. And then in this match, he was obviously very dominant, like you said. Seidel did a great job of selling, and it was fun. I would say that it, if you really want to see a really enjoyable display of Danielson technical wrestling in 2007, this is a good match to watch. It is also weird, that you mentioned, and this has been true of Seidel for a while, that as a heel, he's really not dastardly at all. You know what I mean? He doesn't do anything that's that bad. He's just arrogant. That's the only, he showboats. He's not a cheater in any way. Even now, even with Sweeney in his corner, I find that very strange also. So there's a lot of strangeness to this. I still think that I would have enjoyed a back and forth match with these two trying their best to have a great competitive match better, especially since they never really did that in ROH. And I think they could have had a great match, and this wasn't a great match, but it was enjoyable for what it was. I do agree with you. It was weird. It was not exactly what I would have thought I would be looking for from these two. But it's Danielson, so if he gets to wrestle and kick the crap out of somebody, that's always going to be entertaining.
Yeah, and again, I want to preface, like you were saying too, what I said before, which is if you come into this looking for just them trying to have the best, most action-packed, epic match you could imagine that these two might be capable of against each other, that you will, if you come in with that expectation, you will be, I think, disappointed unless you really like what they do. Joe, what'd you think?
There was a financial news network and cable channel in the 80s. I think switched to sports at night. They did wrestling sometimes. I think they aired a Kerry Von Erich versus Ric Flair match, and they should have gotten the rights to air this match with the talk of retirement funds and all that. But no, I agree that the vibes were weird in this because you would think the guy pushing fiscal responsibility would be the babyface, but he just totally ate up poor Matt Sydal, the heel, who didn't do anything remotely heelish. Like Sweeney didn't interfere at all. I'm like, Sweeney, get in there. I help your guy. He's getting killed out here. So it was weird, but it also brought out mean Bryan Danielson, probably my favorite Bryan Danielson, where he could just punish this guy, which is always just entertaining. So, I thought the work was very good. It was just kind of weird given, and I'm someone dropping in, I'm not following every show. And I just thought like, oh, that's not how I expected this to go, but it was still entertaining. And we got to see them rematch 15 years later on Rampage for probably a more, a match you would expect a bit more. But I did notice like when Sweeney was going to the back afterwards, like his back was covered in sweat. Like inside out gave him a hug. I was like, ooh, I think I'd rather be in the main event street fight than do that. Thank you.
So I just Googled, and I normally don't like to use AI, but this is what came up. Out of curiosity, I Googled how much would $3,333.33 invested in 2007 be worth today? And according to Google, based on data through early 2026, that amount of money invested in the S&P 500 at the beginning of 2007 would be worth approximately $22,900 to $23,000 today.
Still not quite a retirement fund.
No. But clearly, Sydal and Sweeney made the wrong decision here. Yes. But after the match, Bryan leaves and Sweeney yells at Sydal. So, and again, another great there's so many good comedy moments on the show. Sydal yells back, "I don't have a retirement fund anymore. I had a retirement fund like 20 minutes ago," he says. Sydal shoves Sweeney as I believe the crowd chants, "We want Bobby." So the crowd's really getting into the whole Bobby Dempsey thing. Sweeney then yells at Sydal some more until they hug and make up. So because of the nature of, at this point, I'm sure ROH probably knew Sydal was leaving for WWE. This is like one of the shortest tenured joining a stable, falling out, strife cycles you'll see in wrestling. We then get an ad for the new Ring of Honor wrestling school with new head trainer Delirious.
I'm laughing just thinking about it.
Yeah, and in fact, that was reported. So for people who hadn't been keeping track, the next class was going to be in late September, and Delirious was Delirious taking over from Bryan Danielson. So Danielson was stepping down as head trainer, as he had done in recent times. And so I probably know what you're looking forward to. I loved a couple things. Let's see if they're the same things you liked. I loved that one of the perks they mentioned was access to an extensive video library if you joined the Ring of Honor Wrestling School. And they just showed a shot of the Ring of Honor merch table. And I just was thinking, that's a perk a wrestling school couldn't offer today, like access to an extensive video library, because I would just go, oh, you mean the internet? And then I think this is the great line where the voiceover guy goes, as part of the curriculum, you'll also be at the shows, gaining important behind-the-scenes experience as an important part of the Ring of Honor live events, which seemed to me to be a very dressy way of saying, we're going to make you work ring crew and security. Like you're going to get I'm sure you do get to see. I'm sure all these students do have stories about cool interactions they had with wrestlers, especially like big name guys that came in. But that was a very flowery way to kind of soft sell the idea of you're going to be setting up the ring here.
You're gonna learn how to use those old fashioned credit card swiping machines, because that's what they had at the merch table. You know those things where like you like they run it over the credit card. There's like carbon paper and stuff that you have to sign. Like the ROH merch tables used to have that back then.
Wow. I guess they just have one of those like Stripe machines that never seems to take my credit cards wherever I go now that uses them. But yeah, it was kind of an adorable thing to see them phrase it like that. Although if you're a wrestler that took that at face value and then realized what that meant, maybe it wouldn't be so adorable. But paying your dues is a thing, I guess. And that brings us Matt.
Wait, you didn't mention the other funny thing though.
Well, what was the other thing?
Well, just
I missed something.
It was Delirious just like rambling in the background while the voiceover talked over him. So like they kept cutting Delirious going, blah, 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 but like they wouldn't ever focus on what he was saying because the person doing the voiceover was like, and Delirious will teach you blah blah blah, while you just see Delirious going blah, 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 blah. Like I thought that was very funny too.
Yeah, and it's funny to think about, like, obviously anyone that was signed for the school knew Delirious was a character, but it's funny to think in kayfabe that the head of the school now is a guy who, in canon, doesn't really speak English. Like, yeah, he's going to teach you how to do things. And they show a promo where he's not speaking something that you could understand in any language.
Yes.
So, that brings us to the semi-main event, the ROH World Title match, Takeshi Morishima successfully defends the world title when he defeats Claudio Castagnoli via pinfall in 15 minutes, 30 seconds after he hit a backdrop driver. Matt, this is a match that is kind of fondly remembered by those real heads. You know, it's not like a historically important Ring of Honor match. What did you think about revisiting it all these years later?
Well, before I talk about the match, I have to mention the big headline, which is Morishima debuting his, quote, giant baby haircut here.
Oh, God.
And
mistake.
And you know, I mean, just a classic move. We have not seen that yet in ROH. So Trevor, you're a thumbs down on the haircut.
Yeah.
Joe, are you a thumbs up or a thumbs down on the haircut?
I can't support that haircut, no.
Okay, well, Morishima, he wrestled this match with the haircut. So stay tuned if you want to watch matches with that haircut. You got a few coming up.
Matt, you're going to make one of our listeners very happy because I don't do this often, but I was checking like reviews of the show on like some of the podcast things. And there was a review of someone that gave us a very glowing review of the show, but they said their one criticism was he would like us to talk about like the personal appearances and the sartorial choices of the wrestlers more. So I like to think that you psychically knew that and did that just for him. Not since we ranked the attractiveness of all four original members of Generation Next. Have we delved into the looks?
Now we have to rank the attractiveness of everybody in Sweet and Sour Inc. That's for that's for the next show.
Okay, next time.
Yeah. Sorry, Joe. If you wanna mail email your picks,
you can mail in a ballot.
Yeah. Go ahead, Joe. Yeah, this is. I mean, this is. I think. Am I wrong? This is the first time Claudio's had a world title match in ROH. Is that correct?
My memory is dog shit, but I think so. I mean, this certainly feels like the biggest singles match he's ever had in the company. Even apart from the tournament, he just had the 2 shows ago.
Yeah, and this is an example of a wrestler treating it as such. You know, like he is like, okay, this is the biggest match I've had. This is the biggest performance I'm going to give. And so he just goes right at it. And that's one of my favorite things about this match. It's like Morishima was really good because he's a really good wrestler and he puts on a great performance. But this was Claudio night, and Claudio was like, I'm going to make this special. And he just makes sure of it. Like he starts fast, gets immediately shoulder tackled down by Morishima. But then, Claudio tries to powerbomb Morishima on the apron, but sort of baits Morishima into doing a butt drop onto the apron. That way Claudio can hit an elbow drop off the apron onto Morishima on the floor, which we don't really see. And then very early in the match, in one of the biggest spots of the match, Claudio just picks up Morishima just out of nowhere and just giant swings him around. And obviously it's not as long as his long giant swings, but it's still pretty fucking long. And the crowd gets to their feet, and it's still pretty incredible 18 and a half years later. So just an extremely hot start to the match. During this match, the announcers note that Morishima's dropped 10 to 15 pounds, which I can't tell. But
I thought maybe he looked a tiny bit slimmer,
Yeah.
but I only noticed that once they said that, so I don't think it was much.
Yeah, but also it felt like passive aggressive because they were like, oh, Morishima's trying to pay more attention to conditioning, and it's like I don't know if you want to say that your champ had bad conditioning before, that was a little weird to me. It felt like passive aggressive Vince McMahon and stuff, which
Oh, so go on.
no, which we've seen from ROH commentary before. Honestly, it's not the first time I could think of something like that happening.
I was going to say it's weird that you are right. That is passive aggressive in wrestling. But I would say in life, that sounds like this thing your parent would say to you to try and say you need to lose weight in a nice way.
That's called passive. That's called being passive aggressive, Trevor.
Oh my God, I'm revealing all my childhood. But no, honey, you could be a little more, pay a little more attention to your conditioning.
Yes, again, passive aggressive. But anyway, they also talk about Morishima's travel schedule taking a toll on him, which I guess could become a storyline coming up about how he's having a hard time holding on to the title as the schedule's getting to him. But, Morishima's obviously in control for a while, but Claudio's great mounting a comeback. He knocks Morishima to the floor, hits a super fast and sudden tope, which separated the guardrail and looked, I would say, one of the coolest tope through the ropes that we've seen, honestly. Just one of the best. You see that move in ROH all the time, just like the tope through the ropes. But this is, I think, one of the best I could ever remember seeing in ROH. And then we get into a sequence where Claudio goes for the Ricola bomb a bunch of times, and he can't hit it. So like it just the progression of how he covers for not hitting it, or like the way it gets reversed, is like progresses each time he tries it. Um, like the second time he tries it, he goes for it, and since he can't hit it, he continues to hold on to Morishima's arms and turns it into a roll up. The third time he goes for it, he just falls all the way backwards, and Morishima comes down on top of him. Um, and the crowd's going really nuts for all these near falls. Morishima's hit lariats, missile drop kicks. At one point, Morishima goes up top, and Castagnoli runs up, hits the Insigiri, and a pretty basic but classic superplex. Then he hits a diving European uppercut, and then finally hits the Ricola bomb, and it's as big as it could be because they built it to, this is the fourth try where he actually hits it. Gets a great reaction, and we get even like a "fuck you Sinclair" chant when Morishima kicks out. Then we do a few more spots until finally Morishima hits a hip attack and a lariat for a 2 count, and then a backdrop driver on Claudio. There were a few other near falls in between the Ricola bomb and the finish, and I kind of think maybe they went a little, like they peaked a little bit earlier than they needed to. Like I think the Ricola bomb, after that, they should have gone right to the finish. They snuck in a few spots in between that were not maybe as hot as the ones before it. But other than that, I thought this was like really excellent action-packed match. Claudio was treating it as special, and it came off that way. Good psychology with Claudio building up to the Ricola bomb. It was about a 16-plus minute match. I think it felt quicker than it actually was. Like, it just had so much great action, and the crowd was really up for it the entire time. I liked how Morishima allowed Claudio to be the star of the match, and the crowd gives Claudio a big reaction afterwards that illustrates that. We're about to enter, I think, August of 2007 is the best run of Morishima's title reign. Just like one phenomenal match after another. And I think this is the first of that run. And I think this was the Claudio show, and he did a great job, and he rose to the occasion. And I really, really thought it was a great match.
Joe, what did you think to get to see the kickoff of Primo Takeshi Morishima?
Yeah, this match is so great. It was, like Matt said, it went about 15, 16 minutes, so they kept it a lot shorter, which allowed him to work a quicker pace, which I thought helped the match a lot. I thought, Morishima was, a real monster here. He was manhandling someone as big, if not bigger, than him. And I thought Claudio was so great working underneath. He hit that dive to the floor that broke the barricade, which was so perfect. You'd think they kind of planned it, but I don't think they did. It's just one of those happy accidents that happened there. And Matt talked about the struggle to hit the Ricola bomb. And when he finally hit it, they pulled back to the hard cam so you could see the crowd counting along. I think like half the crowd bought it might have been a pinfall, if only for a brief instant, but then they just yelled at Todd Sinclair afterwards as well. And after that, you kind of figure it's not Claudio's night, and he eats a backdrop driver afterwards as well. It's kind of a shame the main event probably overshadows this a lot, because I think, if you haven't seen this match, you should. It's awesome. It's just great action up and down, just a super world title match. And almost worth the price of admission right there.
Yeah, I won't be disagreeing with either of you on this one. We've seen some ROH matches over the years or through the years that have underdelivered a little bit, and usually they're in the undercard on a B show. And this is an example of the opposite. This is the semi-main event on a B show, a mid card taking on the world champ. And while both guys are very talented, this is the kind of match that occasionally can fall a little short of our highest hopes on this show, because these are matches where one or both of the guys might pull back a little, and they don't do. This match over delivers for me. It is better than you think it would be. For me, it starts right before it starts before the match even begins. It's Claudio. He comes out with his Race to the Top trophy. So many trophies in ROH now. By so many, I mean 2. And although this crowd's been very good all night, they were really into Claudio. They were chanting for him. He got streamers, and those were becoming rarer at this point in ROH history. There's even a fan in the crowd you can see holding up a big Swiss flag that I assume wasn't Joe. You can feel these people are just so excited for the Claudio's getting a big, they're not treating this like just a random B show filler world time match. They're like, we're really excited that Claudio's we know this is a big opportunity for him. This is a step up. And then we get the match, and I'll repeat what I've said in the past. Morishima is very talented. By an ROH, he generally wrestles a very similar match every night unless his opponent pulls him out of his comfort zone. I think one thing we're learning is that even though Morishima was initially booked to be a different kind of ROH champion, one they've never had before, this incredibly dominant monster, occasionally no-selling heavyweight, like a true heavyweight, where he's really shining, different even than Samoa Joe, where Morishima is really shining is when he works with people that really take it to him and put him on the ropes a little bit at times. He works well with other heavyweights that try and throw him around. Like, he worked well with Shingo, who's a junior, but Shingo was a power junior who threw him around. He did great with him. He worked really well with Nigel so far. And with Claudio, you have another heavyweight opponent. And that's not to say that his couple of squashes and the dominant way he's been mostly booked so far, has been a mistake, because I think why these matches against these heavyweights where he gets thrown around a bit more work is because you don't see it all the time in his matches. It's more of a treat. It's like, oh, this guy, he's in it for it tonight. And that's what makes it seem special. Like you mentioned, Matt, Claudio gets a huge reaction for doing a giant swing. But like you said, it's one of the shorter giant swings you'll ever see Claudio do. But he's doing it to a guy as big as Morishima. So it's also one of the most impressive giant swings you'll ever see him do. If every match against every opponent, Morishima was just getting thrown around and working 50-50, stuff like Claudio just hitting his regular signature moves like the Apamari water slide and the Ricola bomb on Morishima wouldn't be special. But because that's not the norm on this reign for him, you're like, holy shit, he's getting him up, he's tossing him. But there's so many of his matches are about how hard it is to get him off his feet. And this is a match I'd say that is Morishima mostly doing his set Morishima routine with his usual spots, complete with mid-match chin lock. But Claudio is wrestling this, I agree with you, Matt, like this is a huge match. He's throwing everything out there. You can tell he's got this energy of like, this is big to me. And Morishima, to his credit, is letting Claudio throw everything at him. He's giving him quite a bit. He's letting Claudio take him off his feet. And so it's not just Claudio versus Morishima set plays. It's Claudio challenging the set plays of Morishima. He's challenging like the aura Morishima's been able to build up a bit in this run. Like even the opening minutes where Claudio takes it to Morishima, they feel special because you're not used to someone doing that to Morishima right at the start of the match. Morishima gets taken off his feet with a god-danged arm drag. And if Claudio does that to anyone else, you're just like, oh, that's a usual Claudio spot. But it's like, wow, he just arm dragged Takeshi Morishima. And yeah, Claudio is just swinging for the fences here. You can tell this is a big match for him. He's pulling out variations of his regular moves. Like he's not doing his crab walk elbow off the second rope to someone in the ring. He's doing it to the floor. And you mentioned that tope. There's got to be like a conversation point in wrestling where wrestlers who do something very rarely, but when they do, it's one of the best versions of that anyone's ever done. Because Claudio very rarely does a tope, and I agree with you, Matt. That's one of the best topes I've seen in a long time. Like that's an all top tier tope. He comes with such huge force. I think he hits Morishima head first. Like he hits his head into Morishima's body, and Morishima, like you said, he crushes the barricades so hard it dislodges them. It's one of the best topes you're going to see in this year. I don't care how much other wrestling you watch if you watch this match, and it's so cool. Eventually gets a holy shit chant, but before you get that, you hear one fan give like, it's been a while since I've heard like a legit, not trying to start a chant. One fan just goes, holy shit. Like he doesn't try to start the chant, he just says it once. And it's like, yeah, you forget that there's a real reason to say that phrase. And some other moments I love in this match, like you again, Matt, you did a great job of mentioning it. I think you counted one more Ricola bomb than you did, so I only thought he tried it 3 times. You said 4, and I trust your judgment on these things way more than me, so I must have missed one. But Claudio, like you mentioned, he does that classic wrestling psychology where he tries to hit a move, in this case the Ricola bomb, his finisher, at least 3 times during the match, and he only hits it on the final try, which is, classic psychology. Tease a move multiple times to make it seem bigger when it hits in the end. But like you were saying, that what makes it cool is every time Claudio attempts it here, at least the ones I noted, something cool and awesome happens. Like that one time, like you mentioned, where he can't get Morishima up, so he turns it into this weird arms crossed pin. And then the time you mentioned where he gets Morishima up in the air, but then Morishima just falls onto a standing Claudio, basically pinning him to the mat, ass first, doing the sit down splash. And I thought that was so cool, especially because I thought back to Eric Stevens on a podcast saying that when he wrestled Morishima, the only thing Morishima did to him that hurt was the sit-down splash. And you think about that and go, well, Morishima's sit-down splash is usually the wrestler's laying on the mat and Morishima is just standing and he just sits down on him. This is Morishima in the air with his ass probably at like Claudio's head or chest level and coming down even harder and Claudio having to basically collapse under him. I thought that must have sucked then. If that really hurts the regular version and he takes it like that. And then, of course, when Claudio does finally hit the Ricola bomb, Joe talked about it, how it seemed like fans actually bought in that moment. They had built up to it so well that maybe he could win. And also smaller details I loved. Morishima does this spot where he does the spot he always does, where he's punching his opponent in the corner, and he shoves the ref so when he tries to break it up so he can keep attacking. And here he covers Claudio, and there's no one to count. And what I thought was great about it was, even though no one is counting because the ref is out, Claudio kicks out at 2, where 2 would have been. And I love that because it shows Claudio is so out of it that he doesn't even know the ref is there, but he's still fighting to survive. And I also appreciated it because sometimes in wrestling they do these visual pinfalls and moments like that for moves that would normally never beat a guy, and the guy stays down for a million seconds, and that always annoys me. And what I love is that move would never pin Claudio, and so even though the ref's not there to count it, Claudio still doesn't like stay down for 10 seconds. He kicks out when you should. And I love near the end, Claudio's hitting Morishima with stuff, and he hits the ropes, and he's hitting the ropes behind. He's hitting the ropes so he's behind Morishima. We just see Morishima's back, not his face. And when Claudio's running back towards Morishima from behind, at the last second, Morishima turns around and just kills him with a lariat. And it's such just a great dramatic moment that's framed well. There's some great moments in this match, and I thought overall this was a great match. Claudio simultaneously, I felt like in this match, he felt like the underdog and the guy that was pushing the champ into a danger zone he's not used to. And I feel like that's a real magic trick to make you have both those feelings in the same match. And I would guess, Matt, I would ask you, like, is this the best single? This has to be the best. My memory's always so bad, but this has to be the best singles match for Claudio and ROH up to this point in his career, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, the only other one that like even stands out to me is the one from the show right before this, right? And this was definitely better. This was definitely better than that.
Agreed.
So yeah, I mean, and even as far as like non-singles matches, like what was the best match we've seen him in besides like Cage of Death or whatever? Like, I guess the one against the Briscoes from Final Battle with Hero.
Yeah,
like those are the best. Those are the best Claudio matches. So this is definitely the best singles.
And for Morishima, I would say this is up there with the Shingo match and the Joe match, which I think I like a little bit more than you, although I know you like it. Like, this is, I think, maybe right up there as the best match of his reign so far, but spoiler, he's going to top it in a few shows. And that brings us to a couple of notes about this. Both from PW Insider. Mike Johnson would write, ROH champion Takeshi Morishima suffered an elbow injury on the first night of Death Before Dishonor weekend in Boston, but still worked Philadelphia the next night. I don't believe he is expected to miss any ring time. So, yeah, I didn't even notice him hurting his elbow, but apparently that happened. And then Mike Johnson also writes, Mike Johnson has been told by at least 7 people, some within the company, some fans, that the August 10th Takeshi Morishima versus Claudio Castagnoli bout in Roxbury, Massachusetts was one of the best matches of the year within ROH and easily Castagnoli's career bout. And again, sometimes when you get these comments from people in the company, they're like hype and hyperbole. I don't think there's much hyperbole in that one. It was great. After the matches, the crowd is fairly mad that Claudio lost. They're booing, they're chanting bullshit. When Morishima leaves, he leaves Claudio alone in the ring to kind of get his props, and he does. He gets a big reaction. And then we join Brent Albright backstage, and he says Morishima has done it again. He's proven what a real champion he is. Brent scouted Morishima's match tonight, and he says what Morishima didn't do tonight is watch and scout Brent. Morishima would have seen Albright destroy 5 people tonight, and the only reason he didn't win his match was because of Delirious. Tomorrow night, Morishima's going to step in the ring with Brent Albright, someone who is strong, quick, has a half Nelson suplex and a deadly armbar. Brent says in Philly he's going to drop Morishima on his head, and if he survives that, he's going to pull his shoulder out of the socket. Tomorrow, Brent walks into Philly as a challenger, and he walks out as the brand new ROH champion. So, setting that up, and that brings us to the main event, a non-title, non-sanctioned Boston street fight. El Generico and Kevin Steen defeated the champions, the Briscoes, Jay and Mark, in 22 minutes, 13 seconds when Steen pinned Jay after a package pile driver on a ladder. Joe, you get first dibs at this. Not only what did you think about this, but since there's a bunch of crowd brawling, did these guys come anywhere near you? Because I'm sure if that had happened, that you would have remembered that.
I was in the bleachers for this, which was beneficial for this. They didn't come by, but I did get to see pretty much all the action take place. And I have 4 matches on my Mount Rushmore of Ring of Honor live experiences, matches that on that particular night and in those crowds got to a special place. It's Briscoe versus Briscoe from Honor Invades Boston, Paul London versus AJ Styles from Night of the Grudges, Spanky versus American Dragon from the American Best of the Super Juniors, and this is the 4th, which is the best Ring of Honor match I ever saw live. And as great as this is on DVD and video, it's even better live because, like I said, I was in the bleachers. I remember just looking down into an ocean of chaos because in the crowd brawling section, which is like the first half of the match, there is no downtime. And sometimes in these scenarios, like, 1 or 2 of the wrestlers are selling and, the focus is on the other 2. But not here because this didn't slow down an iota. And that may seem like wrong or incorrect according to traditional pro wrestling rules. No, you got to let things slow down and sink in. It just totally works here. It's just so crazy, and I'm sure Matt's going to rattle off a million crazy moves and segments, but they didn't waste time, setting up elaborate spots here. They would just grab whatever is handy, whether it's a purse or a shoe or the Section D sign, and just hit the other guy with it. And the brawling looked nasty, and everyone wore street clothes, so they meant business. And the announcers were quiet for this. It wasn't like sometimes in big Ring of Honor main events, they're like, we want to go watch in the crowd, so there's no commentary. That wasn't the case here because it said they were afraid they were gonna the carnage would come to them, which is kind of funny. But I assume I don't think announcers really have added a lot here. And you could say oh, they did too much, they're a bit too reckless at points, but 3 of these guys are on national television, still wrestling almost 20 years later. So there is that. And another thing that kind of stood out to me rewatching is there aren't a lot of near falls in this. There are a couple near the end, but when you think of how near fall heavy modern wrestling can be, this is just such a stark contrast because they brawl so much. There were a couple near falls, the big move at the end, and
they only got into the ring pretty late in the match.
Yeah, pretty late in the match. So there just wasn't.
Yeah, I timed it out. I think the first 12 to 14 minutes of this match, which was I think 22 minutes, is in the crowd. So yeah, only the last maybe 8 minutes, 8 or 9 minutes. So less than half.
Yeah, so this was a thumbs up, if in case you couldn't tell from my previous diatribe. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think people that have been long-time listeners of the show and listen to the other Joe Gagne shows, I think a lot of times Joe reacts, I think like most of us would, to be watching 18, 17-year-old matches where it's we have vague memories and enthusiasms towards things, but we're kind of rediscovering them and rewatching them. And I think I haven't heard you with that kind of it's clear that's a match burned into your mind. So I think that shows how special it was to people there live. And I think you see how special it was to how much ROH thought this was a great match, because you mentioned it, Joe, that early on the commentators, use the excuse of, oh, they might be coming this way, let's get out of here, and they don't do the commentary. Ring of Honor tended to say that only for matches they thought were really special, like Joe versus Kobashi or the Dragon Gate 6-man. So the fact that they gave it that treatment for this, I think that gives you a big indication of what Gabe thought of the quality of this match. As for me, this was a 2006-2007 Briscoe-style match adapted for a street fight stipulation. This match is go, go, go. The action starts before a bell can even ring. Kevin Steen charges the Briscoes in the aisle as they're making their entrance, and he gets backdropped into the crowd, and that's the first spot of the match. We're just off to the races. And like I said, I think the first 12 to 14 minutes of this match are fought in the crowd. And they do what tag brawls do, and I thought, Joe, you made that an important point about it being go, 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 because what happens in this match is what happens in a lot of these tag or multi-man brawls, where the wrestlers pair off and fight in different places in the crowd, and maybe occasionally they cross over. But in these brawls, even in these tag brawls, what you usually get is at least part of it is meandering, where you cut to guys and they're just walking through the crowd, throwing a few punches, killing time before they get into the ring. And like you were saying, not here. The camera is cutting constantly back and forth between the two different pairs, and you're almost always they're almost always cutting to not just random brawling, but to something. Like you're almost always just seconds away from a bump or a chair shot or something notable. It's not just meandering. There's basically no, I would say, aimless meandering in the brawling. And that's what I mean when I say this is an 06, 07 Briscoes match as a street fight. It just starts at an 8 and it never dips. It just keeps going. And the chair shot, and there are chair shots. Like on the show recently, Matt, we've talked about we've noted a couple instances. Oh, that's kind of that spot kind of got a weird reaction, probably because it's reminding people of Benoit or something, in the post Benoit murders world. On this night, no one in that building gave a fuck about brain damage. Not the wrestlers, not the fans, because there were a shit ton of unprotected or barely protected chair shots to the head and head area in this match. And then finally, with the final 8-9 minutes to go, the match makes it to the ring where it stays for the rest of the night. And it does briefly slow here. We get a spot where all 4 guys hit a move, and then they do on each other, and they do the quadruple down. And then right after that, we get a 4-way chair standoff and another quadruple down. And normally in street fights, I prefer the more natural feeling chaos than those two like spots like that, which are big, theatrical, obviously pre-planned spots. But I felt like this match, the crowd brawling before that had been so unrelenting to the point of almost being a little bit overwhelming at a couple points that the viewer and the crowd actually needed a couple moments like that to catch their breath and like just appreciate everything they'd seen. So I actually appreciate them doing that here when I normally might not have. And then we get the last stage of the match where the more props come into play and the bumps get bigger. Generico gets tossed high into the air to land on open chairs. The Briscoes do their usual Black Tiger Bomb neckbreaker combo, but they do it off the top turnbuckle, which is just crazier. Steen, at one point, he sets up a table at ringside and he only opens up one leg, so he can't get up the second leg up, and so it's slanted. And the fans laugh at him, and you can hear him just say, it'll still work. And then minutes later, Steen is battling with a Briscoe on the top turnbuckle, and he gets shoved off it through that table on the floor that's not even fully set up. And to me, that wasn't even the craziest spot, because later in the match, Generico hits Mark Briscoe with a Michinoku driver on this piece of the barricade that looks really rigid and has exposed legs sitting at an angle where if he hadn't placed them properly, you could have like impaled Mark. Then there's a spot where Mark does a dive to the floor that Kevin Steen can't quite catch. And if you watch the spot, if Mark does, he turns and tucks his head at the last possible second. And if he hadn't done that, this would have been like the WrestleMania horrific spot where he had to be hospitalized all over again. Like, he is incredibly lucky. And then Steen brings out a ladder, and this is the second time in this feud that he's brought out a ladder, so we're building to the ladder match blow-off, even though it hasn't been announced yet, I don't think. And Kevin gets tossed to the ladder, and it warps the ladder, and you can see Mark at one point, he's trying to set it up, even though it's warped, for the next spot, and he realizes the ladder's warped, so he tells the ref, like, hold on to it, so he can climb up a closed ladder that has been warped, that's mildly deformed, and leaning in the corner, so he can climb up it halfway, so Generico can end up hitting a springboard cutter off of it. And I thought that's just all of us was just going, I got to improvise something. And I think that and the Steen table spot kind of sum up the energy of these 4, where I wouldn't call them reckless in a backyarder sense, but these are 4 guys that, at least when they're together, if something goes half wrong, where a lot of other wrestlers might go, let's just not do that spot, they're like, we'll make it work. Even if it's incredibly risky, we're going to do it anyway. And Steen and Generico get the clean win. Well, like, Steen kicks Jay in the balls before the finish, but it's a no DQ match, so I guess you can call that clean. And this is Gabe repeating an old play out of his playbook. If longtime viewers or listeners will know, in 2003 and 2004, they had the long Homicide feud with Samoa Joe when Joe was champ, and they wrestled a bunch, but Homicide almost always lost because they weren't going to put the title on Homicide at that point. So they still wanted to give Homicide a feud somewhere in the feud to keep it going, not make it seem pointless. So how do you give the challenger a win in a long feud without putting the belt on him? You do a no DQ match that is, you say, is so dangerous it can't be sanctioned, and that happens to be the one match they win. And they did that for Homicide, and so Gabe, a few years later, he's pulling that trick out again here. Overall, this was great. Almost constant action, huge moves in the closing stretch, some bumps bordering on too risky, just a wild brawl with these guys giving maximum effort. Matt, what'd you think? Close us out.
So, we've talked a lot about the the Steen and Generico Briscoes feud. Certainly, it's the feud of the year in Ring of Honor in 2007. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how anyone could even argue that, but it is. If you think differently, you're wrong. And I feel like for the first, 6 months, 7 months of 2007, it's sort of a slow build to the feud getting started. You have the match in Philly in February. Then Steen and Generico aren't back until April, and you sort of have that kind of weird match where it actually starts with Eric Stevens in the match until Mark comes back from his injury, surprisingly, to join it. And then the next official match between those two is at the Driven tapings in June. But now here in August, we finally really kickstarting the feud where these two teams are involved with each other basically on every show for the next few shows until they blow it off at the ladder match. And they have a series of gimmick matches. And on the next show, they're going to have a bunch of singles matches. So in some ways, this match is like the kickoff to the meat of the feud, where I think in most universes, this would be the blow-off stipulation, right? And what they do here would be the blow-off.
Yeah.
And it's kind of just the beginning of this pretty epic run these two teams have. I know some people like this match best. I would guess. Joe, is this your favorite match of their series?
I would think so, but there may be live bias in there. But yeah, I'd say so. It's my favorite.
Yeah, I wouldn't say this is my favorite of their series, but it certainly gives you something that none of the other matches give you in terms of the wildness and the crowd brawling and just the, like you said, the go, go, go aspect of it from the beginning. I know that Joe hyped up that I had a list of spots, so I know, and Trevor, you said a lot of them, but I will say some of them. So first of all, right at the beginning, it's sort of this weird dissonance where they come out to Generico's music, Ole Ole, and Generico is just his normal happy-go-lucky self, dancing around, slapping hands. But Steen is just not playing that game. He just stands grimly in the corner, looking at the entrance, ready to strike. And of course, then when the Briscoes do come out, they do strike, and that's when Steen's charges and Jay immediately backdrops him over the guardrail. They go at it like crazy in the crowd. The announcers run away. They got chairs very early on. They're throwing each other on chairs. Generico throws a table into the crowd, chucks a bunch of chairs into the ring. Thankfully, the crowd does not join in doing that. So when Mark does his first big dive off the top rope onto Generico in the crowd, it's right near the table, but they don't touch the table. And I'm not sure if they were supposed to or not, but at that point, you see Steen look into the camera and yell, "Oh yeah!" And then he powerbombs Mark through the table, which was Steen is just so good at playing to the cameras. Then yes, they do have a lot of chair shots to the head, and I do think that stands out more negatively than at other points because this was right after the Benoit murders, and I'm not sure the timeline of when they realized how much concussions were a likely culprit in the Benoit stuff. Early on they were talking about roid rage and stuff. I feel like by August they were already talking about the concussions and CTE. And
I don't know if the
that.
autopsy that revealed the CTE would have been out yet, but I also think a lot of us, I think, were already talking about that problem. We were focusing more on concussions, I think, right away. So it wasn't like we needed the autopsy. And so I was a little surprised. I didn't remember just how many insane chair shots are in this match this shortly after the murder.
Yeah, right, exactly. The crowd, they continue to brawl through the crowd, lots of chucking each other onto chairs. It's pretty funny to watch Mark Briscoe in jeans doing a standing moonsault onto Steen on the floor. There are matches like this where I'm like, we could use a split screen, but it was still fun to see the chaos of the cutting back and forth. At one point, Steen is beating on Mark with someone's shoe, and then he just chucks it back into the crowd. Mark dumps Steen head first into a garbage can and then tips the garbage can over. Steen does a really cool fisherman's buster on Mark onto a chair in the crowd. Then he does it again later on when they get back in the ring, and I think that gets a big pop because I don't even think the crowd noticed it the first time because it's in the crowd. It's funny that Generico goes for an ole ole haluva kick on the floor because ole ole it's Generico. But Jay catches it and throws him back. That's when Mark hits that cutter on Steen leaping off the guardrail that you were talking about. Then there's a spot where everyone is lying by the ring, and Steen reaches up toward the camera and yells, "Mom!" which I thought was funny. Was Jay the only person who bladed in this match, by the way?
I think so. That's another thing I forgot. When I saw him bleed, I thought, oh, everyone's going to bleed. But I think by the end of the match, I think he was the only guy bleeding.
Yeah, and I think he reblades at one point, actually. I think he blades himself twice. There's a spot where Steen, actually, no, Steen basically spears Mark into the guardrail, which I think was probably the one that Morishima broke, and it tips over. And then Steen picks up the whole section of guardrail and chucks it. And he had to be very careful doing that because he chucked it in a way where it was very clear like that it was gonna like go downward and not fly into the crowd, because that could have really hurt a fan if he had thrown that into the crowd, because it was like a whole big heavy piece of guardrail. And during this point, there's a fan that yells, "You're not going to see this shit on ECW," which true by the 2000 versions of ECW, but it is pretty funny that ECW became the symbol of like tame sanitized wrestling in 2007.
It would be funny for a younger listener who like it doesn't really remember or just go, no, you probably could like see it in 95 ECW.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
This guy's lying.
Exactly. Then they set up more tables. Jay hits a backdrop suplex on the table on Steen. Then finally they get into the ring. They keep pulling tables. I feel like if there's one little criticism I have about the match besides the chair shots to the head, it's like maybe a little too much table stuff. There's like the first breather of the match is like a minute where Steen is setting up a table and no crazy moves are happening. That's the spot where Steen is like trying to set up the table and the fans like, and he looks at the fans and like, it'll still work after the table breaks. But the thing I liked about the table spots is there's none of them involve like putting someone on top of a table and making them wait there, which is usually what makes the table spots pretty bad. Eventually we get into finally like the chair standoff between the four guys, and the crowd chants "hit the ref," but instead they all brain each other in the head. Again, not comfortable to watch, but the crowd was sure into it. That's when we get a "This is awesome" chant, which again, surprising after the Benoit incident, but I get it. If you're in the crowd at that moment, they all hit each other with chairs. They fight by the chairs. The Briscoes toss Generico into the lights, and he comes down stomach first on both chairs, which is still a pretty crazy spot. Then we get into the finish. The Briscoes hit the top rope, splash mountain, neckbreaker combo. Steen pulls the ref out of the ring. The Briscoes hit the Doomsday device. Steen breaks up the pin, and that's when Steen pulls out the ladder, and we start setting up the final spots to build to the ladder match. Mark climbs up the ladder to a "please don't die" chant, but he has the ref hold it so he doesn't die, and that's when we get that springboard cutter off the ladder. But Mark sort of jumps into the move a little, obviously, in that spot. It's not the cleanest cutter we've ever seen. Like it seems like maybe Mark was up too high, like you said. But it happens. You admire the ingenuity. And then we get to the finish where Jay goes for the Jay Driller and Steen kicks him low and hits the package pile driver onto the ladder, and Steen gets the win. Yeah, this was definitely like obviously insane, incredibly brutal, hate-filled, entertaining. The Briscoes, were their most Briscoe in this match. I think Steen was his most Steen. If anyone felt like the odd man out, it was Generico a little bit, but he definitely held his own. But I would say he was the least memorable player in this match, I would say. I think there are other matches these teams are going to have where he is a little bit more salient to what makes the match good. I think this is much more Steen's element, and it's certainly the Briscoes element. So you definitely can't knock the effort and the excitement, and the crowd reactions came off incredibly well.
Yeah, just fantastic. After the match, we get a standing ovation and an ROH chant. Steen grabs the mic and says, "This building has just transformed itself into a gigantic crystal ball, because what you have here is a clear indication of the future." He says in Hartford, in a steel cage, they're taking the Briscoes belt. So they were really doing the hard sell on this show with two different post-match in-ring mic spots, this and the Roddy thing, setting up the cage matches on the very next, not the next show, but 2 shows from now in Hartford. And I looked up I was thinking, were they just really trying to push fans in Boston to make the drive to Hartford? And I Googled Roxbury to Hartford, and I think that's like 2.5 hours each way. Joe, you didn't get talked into making a 5-hour round trip for Hartford, did you?
No, in Hartford, from where I was, it was only like an hour. But this was my last Ring of Honor show for a couple of years. So no,
you couldn't go an hour to see double cage matches.
Hartford, no.
Oh, Hartford burn.
Joe, let me if you don't, Joe, if you don't mind my asking, what do you think? What it was that kind of just made you decide, like, all right, no more ROH for a while?
It wasn't like a conscientious decision where I'm like, well, enough of that. And especially after a show like this, I'd be super pumped. And nor did I think like, well, that's a good way to go out on. It was just kind of where I was in life at that time. I was a couple months away from proposing to my wife. And then, we had a kid, and then life just comes at you for a bit. And I'd been going to Ring of Honor shows for like 5 years at that point. I'd seen so much great stuff, and it seemed like a different time in the promotion. Like a lot of guys were gone, like Samoa Joe had left, and Homicide was gone. A lot of guys were like, Punk was long gone at that point, and Cabana was gone. A lot of those classic guys were gone, and it's just kind of like, okay, I'd seen the best. And I think Gabe gets fired like a year or so later, and it's like, okay, that seemed like a good way to end it. I followed along. I wasn't watching a ton of DVDs because they were really pumping them out. It felt around this time, but I certainly followed the promotion for a long time, and still, wanted them to do well. But it was just kind of one of those things where it was like, okay, yeah, just life gets in the way. And I've seen so much, and like I said, a lot of shows in Boston on Friday were hard to get to. It seemed like Boston had been kind of, we were the Friday part of a doubleheader. We were the B show town at this point, and I know this is going to sound kind of silly, but it was kind of a bummer we didn't get a 5th-year festival show, because we were one of the main, we were the first territory Ring of Honor ran outside of Philadelphia. And that's probably just a quirk of scheduling, but I'm sure listening, who cares? But that was like, that was kind of a bummer to me at that point. So it's kind of just mostly life at that point. I still have enormously fond memories of the promotion following it. And, I'm glad I get to relive them talking to you guys.
Thanks, Joe. And I guess it also coincides with you, temporarily ending the podcast. I guess permanently ending it as like a regular, like weekly thing, right around the same time, right? So I guess it makes sense.
And the next show you would have seen if you had still gone to the Boston shows I just looked up was Honor Nation, and that had Morishima versus Kevin Steen. It had Aries versus Danielson. It had Necro Butcher versus Jay Briscoe in an Anything Goes match. So I mean, not a bad lineup at all. But this I don't remember it being as good in execution as this card. So you probably did leave on a high note, I think, for Boston. Matt. But speaking of high notes, the high note of any show, who wins the Matt F. Trophy? You've already revealed for the odds makers, you already revealed it will not be Pele Primo a second time. But
yes.
Who wins the Matt F. Trophy this episode?
For me, this one was pretty easy for Claudio Castagnoli. He just really stepped it up, and to me is the star of the show in a lot of ways. As great as that last match was, the individual performers, the performance that I'll remember most from the show was Claudio's.
And Joe, as the guest, you should get to review the show overall first. You've already given some thoughts on. I mean, I think we can tell where you're going to go, where probably all of us are going to go. But what did you think just about rewatching the whole show all these years later?
Oh yeah, big thumbs up on this show, just based on the last 2 matches alone. But the whole show is good, and it's a breezy watch. I think it comes in like under 3 hours. It's not some monumentally long show. It largely flew by. The wrestling was not excellent, was at least good, and maybe other points very good. So yep, big thumbs up show. If you've never seen this one, I definitely check it out.
Yeah, I thought this was a great show. I think one thing that's really good about it is Matt and I have watched a bunch of Ring of Honor shows where I'll get into the position of being like, oh, there's a couple really good and interesting matches, but they don't really scratch that epic, like the kind of match you want to see from Ring of Honor, that 4-star plus, that really going for the swing for the fences. And I a lot of times I'll watch these shows, and if I see one or two of those good, like to me, Matt Sydal Danielson and and Nigel Hero are both like that on this show, where they're really interesting matches, and I think they're both pretty darn good matches, but they don't kind of scratch that last itch. And so a lot of times when I watch a show like that, I'll get up to the last couple of matches and go, man, if they just have one or two traditional Ring of Honor like go for your throat crazy matches at the end, this will be a great show. And sometimes on these B shows in particular, guys hold back a little, and we don't get that. This is a show where they set themselves up for that, and then those last two matches absolutely deliver. You get two great matches in completely different styles, but both maximum effort, just wild, over-delivering. And so I think overall it's a really fun show. There's a lot of humor on this show that really worked for me. There's a good variety of like a lot of different, whether it's the comedy of the Nigel Hero match, or the weird young boy-esque vibe of the Danielson-Seidel match, or a crazy main event brawl with Plunder, or like a really good just ROH style heavyweight world title match. Like, you just get a lot of different kinds of good to great on this show. So big thumbs up from me. Matt?
I probably would be the low man on the show. I mean, I still thought it was a really, really good show, especially on the back of those last two matches. I like the undercard less than the two of you. Maybe just like a little too much shtick for me. But Trevor, you do make a good point that where this show doesn't have like the cavalcade of incredible matches top to bottom, it does make up for it in that beyond the two great matches at the end, what it does offer is variety. And I think, that's a kind of great show that you don't always get nowadays, even when you get great shows. It's like that something different throughout the show to keep it interesting. And this show definitely had that. So, yeah, one of certainly the best show we've reviewed since Driven, at the very least.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say this is like the best Ring of Honor show we've ever seen or anything like that. I will say this is probably one of the better shows to recommend. If someone just said a gun to my head, recommend me a Ring of Honor show where a wrestling fan will probably like at least one match on the show. I feel like there's at least probably one match, no matter who you are, that you will really like on the show, because there's enough really different stuff that kind of hit the different quadrants of wrestling.
The irony of that comment, Trevor, is that just based on who you are and your reputation, if someone ever were to hold a gun to your head, that probably would be the sort of thing they would be demanding from you.
You should see my DMs. I've been getting yelled at once again. I've been hearing some demands from people in wrestling. I'll say that.
You need to tell me some of that off the air. All right.
I will. Yeah. Okay. And so, yeah, that brings us to plug. So, ThROH The Years at gmail.com is our email address. ThROH, just the way it's spelled on your podcast app. Trevor Dame on Twitter. That's my Twitter handle. Mayor MGF is Matt's, and we're also on Blue Sky under similar handles. Joe, what would you like to plug today?
First of all, I like to plug the thought that the person who did the shooting outside of the show is the same one putting a gun to Trevor's head and demanding. But beyond that, you can follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky at Joe Gagne. 5-star match game archives are still out there. We did the 2025 year in review show. I'll try to pump out a few more of those as the year goes on. But I want to plug ThROH The Years, one of my favorite podcasts, and it's been such a blast to be on it all these years. Matt and Trevor do not only great work but important work as well, kind of chronicling the rise of these wrestlers who are all over national television now. And despite at the time we were told like, oh, this is just some stupid independent wrestling company, it's like, well, no, this was important, and it's showing because it dictates a good chunk of the industry today. So we were right and they were wrong.
And Joe, I want to thank you, Joe, first of all, for introducing me to being on podcasts and setting me down this bizarre path that I'm on, and being a great just role model as a host and as a wrestling fan, and just as a really good guy. And thank you I think you helped us a lot. You've been on the show since the very early days and got us a lot of positive attention. And, everyone respects you. Despite what Trevor says, everyone thinks you're one of the greatest people in the internet wrestling scene and have been for decades now. And, just a super duper good guy. And we're going to miss having you on the show, but I'm going to demand that, especially as we get toward the end in a couple of years, like we have maybe some special stuff planned near the end of the podcast, you must come back on the show. So this will not be the last time you appear on ThROH The Years. I guarantee it.
Yeah, I
I'll
was
be
going to say
back
that.
for Defy or Deny 2 from Plymouth, Massachusetts in 2011. So I'll talk to you in
Yeah.
in
No,
10 years. Yeah.
I was going to say too, you are welcome back anytime you want. And I was going to say, like Matt, we might pull you back into service. So stand on guard because you might have to answer the call whether you've been to a show or not, sir. But
All right.
no, I will echo Matt's thoughts, which is as much as I joke about Joe and how bad my first ever podcast appearance ever in wrestling was on your show. No, Joe, I remember like a year or two later, you sent me a DM saying you should do a podcast, and you were very nice, like just to completely unprompted. I always remember that. That was such a nice thing, and yeah, Joe is a very nice guy. And for people that are, I know we have some younger listeners that are like in their early 20s. You might not know just how long. Like Joe was one of the original people in wrestling podcasts, just interviewing like a wide variety of people. Like Joe versus the World would really cross a few different kind of circles of people. A lot of podcasts, you have your circle of friends and your circle of acquaintances, and you stick to them. Joe would really have like the Mike Sempervive, Dr. Keith circle, and then the message board circles that Matt and I and Justin Shapiro would, and then he'd have like American Balloon on or Bix or Rob Naylor, like just he really Joe is just one of those guys where everyone likes him. That's why I find it funny to joke about not liking him, is because everybody likes. He's like almost the Alan Cunahan level of, if you have a problem with him, there's something really not just wrong with you. There's something bizarre about you. I want to hear why, because it doesn't make sense why you could even have a reason. So
Whereas if you have a problem with Trevor, you're just normal.
Yeah. I mean, like, I can probably guess 5 of them right off the top of the head. So yeah, thank you so much, Joe. And so next time on the show, we will be Joe-less, but we will be covering Death Before Dishonor 5 Night 2, the second half of the double shot. Brent Albright gets his match, which might sound bad, but the memory of it is it's good. There's a big resilience, no remorse core Philly street fight. Bryan Danielson wrestles Mike Quackenbush in like a kind of a dream match to some fans. It should be a fun show again. So until next time, have a good time. Have a great time.